I become a Mecha. I can evolve infinitely. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101, Rifts of Holes. Without exception, the old people all showed a haggard look of dying. They did not react to the arrival of Satoyu and Aozi. They just turned their heads slightly in the dead silence and stared at the two nervous people with their eyes. It's too cold here. The old people can't stand it. Satoyu could no longer bear the oppressive atmosphere and subconsciously touched his nose with his hand. Although the air raid shelter built in the mountain will be lower in this season, it is definitely not to the point where people shiver. There is no heating facility in the air raid shelter. There is nothing I can do. Kobayashi smiled helplessly. At this time, he had led the two people into the power generation room. Satoyu and Aozi, who were no longer being watched, immediately felt relieved. Are there no other people who can move here except you? Satoyu stepped forward to help Kobayashi pour diesel into the generator and expressed his doubts. Originally, there were a total of 12 people including me. Now there is only one left. Satoyu understood Kobayashi's subtext. 2 days ago, the government and the Watcher Alliance mobilized everyone to evacuate, but at that time there were only 2 hours left before the monster tide arrived, and almost everyone in the county who could still run followed the main force. Kobayashi skillfully picked up another barrel of diesel. It's exactly the same as it was 12 years ago. Even with the Mecha now, it can't be changed. Satoyu thought of the people who stayed behind at the Blackhorn industrial base. Then why don't you leave? Is it because there are elderly people who need care? People who stay think so. Kobayashi answered the question calmly. My parents and brother died in the monster attack 12 years ago, so I moved here to live with my grandparents. 6 years ago, I was in college in Kamisaka, but that winter I received a call from the hospital. My grandfather went out to sweep snow for my parents and fell down. The situation was not optimistic. It was only 9 days from the time grandpa fell to the time he passed away. The whole country was under martial law at the time, and flying was banned in the airspace. I took 6 trains and 8 buses, and only saw grandpa on the 7th day. For some reason, he opened his eyes after I started taking care of him. Although he couldn't speak, I could feel that he was awake. I thought it was a sign of grandpa's improvement, but I didn't expect that grandpa closed his eyes on the 3rd night after I came back. I could only watch his electrocardiogram become a straight line. At this point, Kobayashi's voice became a little choked, and his hand pinched his nose unconsciously. Satoyu didn't say anything, but just patted Kobayashi's shoulder hard. Sorry, I lost my composure. Kobayashi forced a smile, and then started the diesel engine. Buzz. After a roar, the white light instantly illuminated the entire power generation room. If you don't mind, can you tell me why you are the only one left here? Seeing that Kobayashi's mood had improved, Satoyu brought the topic back on track. Okay, please let me sort it out for a while. Kobayashi blew his nose and took a deep breath. The 8 people led by Ishimura went out to look for supplies, but not long after they left, the cave entrance collapsed, and we lost contact with the outside world. That night, I was planning to explore the left fork with Maneoko and the other 3, but they persuaded me by saying that at least one person should stay behind, and they haven't come back yet. Don't you know what's on the left side of the fork? Satoyu took a breath of cold air in his heart. He couldn't imagine, if he had chosen that road at the time, would he also become a missing person. In fact, we found the blueprint of the air raid shelter. According to the plan on the blueprint, the left side should lead to the underground floor. The room there stores a complete set of shelter survival equipment, which theoretically allows us to be self-sufficient. But 10 years ago, a group of engineering teams assigned by the coalition government carried out secondary construction on the underground floor, and the drawings and documents have not been updated, so they can only explore with the old drawings, hoping that there will not be too many changes. After listening to Kobayashi's description, Sato's expression became more serious, and his right hand kept touching his stubble. Since Sato's group entered Okioka County, no living people, except the old woman, have been found, and when he and Aozi drove the Heoji to clean the cave entrance, no traces of human activities were found. I'm afraid Ishimura and others are in danger. Sato's words were like a basin of ice water poured on Kobayashi's head. Is that so? After a long silence, Kobayashi still gritted his teeth and accepted this cruel fact. Now that the power has been restored, Chief Sato and Miss Aozi should go with me to see the seriously injured patients first. I think the medicines you brought should help. But when Sato and Aozi followed Kobayashi out of the power room, they found that the lights in the corridor had only slightly increased in brightness. Isn't there an oil storage tank here? Why don't you turn up the lights in the corridor? In Sato's opinion, even if bright lights can't heat up, at least they can make the mental state of the elderly better. Many elderly people can't sleep these 2 days. If the lights are turned up, it will be fatal. Kobayashi's tone sounded like something terrible. Although this reason is sufficient, every time Sato meets those empty and desperate eyes, his heart will feel a pang of pain. The three walked about another 100 meters, turned 2 corners, and finally came to another explosion-proof door at the end of the passage. This time, Kobayashi no longer needed the light of Sato and Aozi, and directly pulled the wheel to open the heavy steel door. The first thing that caught Sato's eyes was the 27 stretchers stained with blood. Under the same dim light, the old people lying on each stretcher were pale and covered with grey moisture-proof cloth. The old people were not only breathing weakly, but also had expressions of pain on their faces, as if they were enduring some unimaginable torment. It was not until the 3 of them stood in the middle of the room that Aozi, with a lost expression, opened the marching backpack on his back and took out 4 emergency medical kits from it and handed them to Kobayashi. This was all the medical supplies for Sato and Aozi. However, Kobayashi just smiled bitterly, as if he had expected it, and shook his head at Aozi. In the tacit silence of the 3, Kobayashi walked to a stretcher and slowly lifted the moisture-proof cloth covering the old man in front of Sato and Aozi. Sato's pupils suddenly contracted. The old man's body was covered with countless festering wounds, and yellow pus and bright red blood kept flowing out of this body full of holes. Sato couldn't guess what made the old man like this. This creepy body was like being stung by a swarm of bees and then thrown into sulfuric acid to dissolve. Snap. The medical kit in Aozi's hand fell to the ground. Captain Sato, Miss Bean, as you can see, this is the situation we are facing. Chapter 102, The Secret of Chang'an. These shouldn't be wounds caused by a monster attack. Sato forced himself to calm down. He looked at the bandages on his arms and came to a conclusion after a brief comparison. Although the small monsters they encountered in the tunnel were not large, the wounds they could leave were at least 5 centimeters long, which obviously did not match the size of the wounds on the old man. On the other hand, the old man's wounds were all over his body. If these were the work of the monsters that Sato and Aozi had cleaned up before, there could be no living people in this room. Seeing that Kobayashi hesitated and did not speak, Sato took the initiative to walk to the old man and examined the body. That made him extremely uncomfortable. Since these are not wounds caused by monsters, there are only 2 possibilities. First, these wounds are caused by humans, so there must be an inhuman sadist hidden among you. But judging from the shape and depth of the wounds themselves, they do not look like injuries caused by sharp weapons, so this possibility is very small. Second, the elderly here are infected with a disease, and the rotting of the body and the pus in the wounds are the external manifestations of this disease. It seems that we can't hide it from Chief Sato. After listening to Sato's guess, Kobayashi's expression seemed relaxed and sad. That's the second one. Sato frowned and gently covered the old man with the moisture-proof cloth. Judging from the current physical condition of the elderly, the medical kits we brought are probably useless. We can only treat the disease itself. Do you have any doctors here? Retired ones will do. However, Kobayashi shook his head, just reached into his coat, took out a crumpled paper ball, and handed it to Sato. Is it left by the doctor? Sato smoothed the paper with his hands and read the handwritten words on it. Do not be exposed to strong light. Do not eat foods containing animal protein. Do not get close to heat sources, and avoid noisy environments. When the patient is silent, lacks expression, and has a low body temperature, the patient can be given MP303 oral medicine, 3 tablets a day, 4 hours apart each time. Usually, the patient will return to normal within 24 hours. If the patient has itchy skin, difficulty in eye movement, and general weakness, the patient can be injected with type I inhibitors on the basis of taking MP303. At this time, it is normal for the patient to show drowsiness. The patient should be encouraged to rest, and the patient will return to normal within 48 hours. Once the patient is found to have shortness of breath, muscle atrophy, and body ulcers, the patient should be stopped from taking MP303 immediately, and the patient should be injected with type II inhibitors, and transferred to the intensive care unit. After that, the patient's pain should be minimized as much as possible. After reading the contents on the paper, Satoyu did not speak immediately. Instead, he folded the paper again, and returned it to Kobayashi's assistant heavily. According to the description, all the elderly people in the air raid shelter were patients. The more than 20 seriously ill patients in this room have even reached the most serious stage. Not only do they have to suffer from illness, but they are also incurable. Do you have the oral medicine and injection mentioned on the paper? Although Satoyu had guessed the result with a high probability, he still wanted to hear Kobayashi's final confirmation. No. Kobayashi clenched his fists. Ishimura and the others went out to find medicine at first, but later. Let's go find it. Satoyu interrupted Kobayashi. Then please take me with you. Kobayashi was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly became excited. I can be your guide. No, someone must be watching here, and professional matters should be left to professionals. Satoyu rejected Kobayashi's request mercilessly. But I'm the only one left here. What's the point of me staying alone? Of course it's useful. Satoyu controlled his volume, and grabbed Kobayashi's trembling shoulders with both hands. I understand your feelings. Ishimura and Naomiko are gone, but you don't even know what they have been through, or whether they are dead or alive. But they are right. If you stay, at least there is still a glimmer of hope. If you go with them, it may not change anything. Who said it's useless for you to stay alone? Without you, we won't receive the distress signal. What will happen to these hundreds of elderly people? Will they die of illness? They need you to stay here, and we need you to stay here too. This is what you should do most. Do you understand? Satoyu's expression was extremely stern. At this moment, he no longer regarded Kobayashi as an ordinary person, but as his direct subordinate. He didn't want to see more elderly people die in such a painful way. The large army couldn't take them with them, so did they deserve to stay where they were and wait to die? I understand. Kobayashi gritted his teeth and agreed to Satoyu's request in a trembling voice. Very good. Daozi and I will go to the pharmacy and hospital to find medicine now. You try your best to take care of these elderly people and wait for us to come back. Satoyu put on an affirmative expression, patted Kobayashi's shoulder with his right hand, then returned the pistol to Kobayashi's and pulled Daozi in the direction they came from. Wait, Commander Sato. Kobayashi wiped his eyes with his sleeve and called out to the two of them. Are there any precautions? Satoyu turned his head. These medicines are not sold in pharmacies. They are only available in hospitals and city hall warehouses. City hall warehouse. Satoyu could understand that some medicines could only be found in hospitals, but he didn't understand why they were also available in the city hall warehouse. This disease is unique to Okioka County and is not contagious, so no pharmaceutical company is willing to develop commercial drugs solely for the people here. The cost is too high, and they can't make money. In the end, our government funded and contacted a medical institution to develop some special medicines that cannot be circulated on the market, so these medicines are transported to the hospital through the city hall. Okioka Prefecture has so many secrets. Satoyu stared at Kobayashi's eyes with a hawk-like sharp gaze, and after a while, he said this. I'm sorry, Commander Sato, and Miss Daozi. Kobayashi lowered his head guiltily. Some things can't be explained to you all at once. No need to apologize. Everyone has secrets that need to be kept. Satoyu waved his hand and left his back to Kobayashi again. But if we find out, the secret will not be a secret. I hope you can explain it to us at that time. If someone asks about it later, just say that I found it myself. Commander Sato. Kobayashi scrubbed his eyes hard. Oh, by the way, there is something I want to ask you before I leave. Sato Yu suddenly turned around. Have you ever seen a 12-year-old child? Chapter 103, Feint to the east and attack in the west. Children. The large army took all the children away when they evacuated from Okioka Prefecture. It's unlikely that there are any children left. Kobayashi was deeply impressed by this because he was the one who helped the large army count the number of children and notified every household. Why did Commander Sato ask this question? Did you see any children outside before? We didn't see it with our own eyes. We rescued an old woman on the road. She said that her grandson went out to seek help from a shelter. I think this shelter refers to the air raid shelter. Old woman. Hearing these 3 words, Kobayashi's eyes were suddenly filled with light. Where is she? Do you know her name? She is receiving treatment in our Mecha escape pod. Her physical condition is not optimistic. Sato, you told the truth. She didn't tell us his name. She only told us about her grandson's condition. He is not tall and has a crescent-shaped scar on his forehead. He wore a green sweater and a red scarf when he went out. Ichiro Sugawara. Kobayashi blurted out. Yes, that's his name. Do you know where he is? He's dead. A trace of imperceptible disappointment flashed across Sato's eyes because he didn't know how to explain to the old man when he woke up. But Kobayashi's next words shocked Sato even more. Since my grandfather passed away, my grandmother's mental state has been getting worse. I heard from the neighbors next door that they often heard my grandmother crying loudly in the house alone, muttering my grandfather's name. Later, I graduated from college and took the initiative to return here. I found a job at the city hall just to live with my grandmother. She is my only living relative and I want to spend more time with her. But I have to go to work and can't take care of her 24 hours a day. As a result, my grandmother suffered from Alzheimer's disease. At first, she would only forget some small things she had done, but then it slowly developed to the point where she forgot she had eaten. Later, my grandmother could no longer remember any new things, and her memory began to slowly regress. She often asked me where my grandfather went, and when he would come back. I always said that my grandfather went to his favorite park for a walk, and my grandmother would always laugh when she heard it. Now grandma can't recognize me anymore. In her memory, I'm still the high school student who is 5 years older than my brother, and my brother is still the naughty boy of 12 years old. As he spoke, tears welled up from the corners of Kobayashi's eyes, wetting his stained shirt. Ichiro Sugawara is your brother. Sato Yu couldn't help but lower his voice. Yes, my father's surname is Kobayashi, and my brother's surname is Sugawara. Kobayashi couldn't help sobbing, and kept wiping tears from the corners of his eyes with his hands. That's why she told us about the entrance to the air raid shelter 12 years ago. Sato Yu murmured, don't cry, kid, you just take care of the others here. I promise we will definitely come back with medicines and supplies, and your grandma will be fine. Okay, I believe in Chief Sato and Miss Dowsey. Kobayashi coughed twice and showed a somewhat forced smile. It's a deal. Sato Yu turned around and pulled Dowsey and walked towards the entrance of the tunnel. Roar. Amid the monster's angry howl, a stream of dark yellow liquid penetrated the thick rock wall on the spot, almost rubbing Xingshan's back armor. Baying. The terrain here is complicated. We will fight it in a roundabout way here. Yu Zio, who had just escaped a disaster, immediately conveyed the message to the manuscript 03 on the other side. Okay, you attack, I'll cover. Baying had the same idea. Before this, the two had fought with this twisted monster for dozens of rounds and basically figured out the monster's action mode. If the monster is more than 500 meters away from the two mechas, it will use venom spray as a long-range attack method. Xingshan's shoulder armor was hit by this attack once, and a large hole with a diameter of 2 meters was pierced on the spot. The spreading venom will also cause further corrosion to the mechanical parts around the wound. In addition, the monster will also launch a celestial flower scattering style splash spray at targets within 500 meters. This disgusting living substance is actually shot out from the monster's rib-like body. They are like leeches. Once they attach themselves to the target, they will constantly gnaw the armor with their venom-covered suckers and drill into the inside of the mecha. This attack effect was also tested by Crossing Shine. Although those bugs can destroy Crossing Shine's artificial external armor in a few seconds, as a mechanical life form, Crossing Shine's basic constituent elements seem to have extremely strong lethal toxicity to these bugs, so this type of attack does not cause much damage to Crossing Shine. However, these long-range attacks are simply child's play compared to the monster's melee. When the distance between the monster and the mecha is less than 200 meters, it will first use its arthropod-like arms to attack. To the surprise of the two, this lightning-shaped twisted arm can actually be retracted. If the mecha unfortunately enters the extension range of the arm at this time, the yellow-green centipede tentacles on the monster's arm will instantly harden into sharp barbs, tearing the mecha into pieces alive. Beiying can only be thankful that the manuscript 03 he is driving is agile enough to use the reverse joint power to escape the monster's attack range before the barbs are about to touch the body. As for the monster's last melee attack, it uses the thick tentacles on its head to launch a whip that can leave an afterimage in the air. The monster only used this move when manuscript 03 launched a missile attack on it. At that time, a full 7 split missiles rushed into the range of 100 meters in front of the monster, but they were all blocked by the arc drawn by the tentacles in the air. After Yuzao and Beiying had seen the monster's 4 attack methods in succession, they decided to avoid close combat with this monster as much as possible. Even if they had to fight in close combat, they could only let Crossing Shine do it. I'll attract its attention from the front, and you sneak attack with missiles from the back. As soon as he finished saying this, Crossing Shine deliberately stopped and turned to face the monster rushing towards him at high speed. Hardened. Almost at the moment when the venom spray was about to hit Crossing Shine's chest armor, the black fluid instantly covered the entire mecha. Puff. The dark yellow venom failed to penetrate the target for the first time, and the splashing liquid bloomed in the air like fireworks. But the monster did not give up the charge. Instead, it howled with excitement and quickened its pace. Buzz. Crossing Shine lit up the red plasma axe blade and took a posture ready to fight head-on. At the same time, manuscript 03 also successfully circled behind the monster, and all the aiming frames locked onto the target at this time. The next second, Beiying issued an operating command in his mind. Fire. Chapter 104, Defeating the Enemy with Force. Almost at the moment when manuscript 03 launched the missile, Crossing Shine, who had activated the hardening of his whole body, also swung the life-breaking axe and rushed towards the monster. As the monster and Crossing Shine approached each other, the distance between the two sides was directly shortened to within 300 meters. Roar. With the monster's creepy roar, 2 arms that could be extended and retracted instantly surrounded Crossing Shine from both sides, and hundreds of yellow and green centipede tentacles suddenly turned into countless sharp barbs. Crossing Shine chose to ignore these attacks, which was also the main reason why he activated the hardening of his whole body. But he underestimated the power of the monster. Crack. In a flash, the monster's arms suddenly changed direction, shrinking rapidly from the outside to the inside, trying to embrace Crossing Shine in his arms. The dense barbs kept rubbing against Crossing Shine's hard armor, and the sparks generated by the friction made the whole scene like cutting metal with an electric saw in an industrial workshop. The whistling air mixed with the monster's roar, like a man playing the cello with a hacksaw, suddenly appeared in the symphony orchestra. At this moment, Crossing Shine was like a button stuck in a zipper. He had never expected that the monster's seemingly weak arms would have such brute force. At the critical moment, the 8 gorilla guns on Crossing Shine's abdomen suddenly aimed at the monster's exposed body. Target locked fire. The surging power pushed the neatly arranged bullets into the barrel. The conical bullets rotated under the intense high temperature and air pressure, passing through the burning muzzle flames, leaving a torn bullet mark in the air at a speed that the human eye could not catch. The next second, the monster's body retreated step by step under the impact of fierce artillery fire, and the smelly blood plasma sprayed out from the hole, pierced by the bullet. Now, Crossing Shine felt that the arms that were tightly bound to the body were relaxing, so he seized this opportunity and forcibly broke the bondage. At the same time, a blue meteor also appeared in Xingtian's vision. It was a missile attack from manuscript 03. Xingqian stepped forward, changed to holding the axe with both hands, and without hesitation, swung a vertical chop at the monster's body that was beaten into a honeycomb. Puff. Roar. Amid the monster's deafening wail, the red plasma axe blade easily cut through the thick tentacles. Steaming hot air emerged from the cut, and dark yellow pus and thick blood blended together, slowly dripping along the edge of the columnar tentacles. Just as Xingqian was about to take advantage of the victory and make up another axe, his wrist suddenly began to swell. Then, 7 5-meter long tentacles suddenly emerged from under Xingqian's wrist armor, instantly wrapped around his forearm, and exerted force in the opposite direction of Xingqian's chop. This directly caused the red axe blade to chop into nothing. Boom. Although Xingqian's second attack failed, the missiles fired by Manuscript 03 all hit the base of the monster's tentacles due to Xingqian's frontal containment, exploding a string of blue sparks. Seeing that the sneak attack was successful, Xingqian suddenly jumped back and distanced himself from the monster again in the last 2 seconds of hardening. Only then did Yu Zhao have time to carefully observe his wrist that had become abnormal. 7 brown tentacles covered with suction cups were still wrapped around Xingqian's arm like hinges, and among these tentacles, there was a huge, almost rotten eyeball. Parasitism? When did it happen? Just as Yu Zhao was puzzled, the dark yellow eyeball suddenly made a gurgling sound, and then quickly expanded into a disgusting tumor, which exploded with a bang. The 7 tentacles rooted in the surface of Yu Zhao's body also changed. When the dark yellow eyeball began to swell, the cluster of tentacles also dehydrated, and withered at a speed visible to the naked eye, and finally turned into lifeless debris that fell off at the touch. Since it can't parasitize on me, it buried seeds inside the armor. Yu Zhao turned over his damaged wrist armor and used the black armor covering the gap between the body and the armor to clean up these inactive biological garbage. Roar. After a shrill roar, the explosion smoke that blocked the monster's vision also dissipated. The originally thick and powerful tentacles are now only half left, struggling weakly, and the neck, where the tentacles and the torso are connected, is a bloody mess. Because the shape of this monster is really beyond common sense, Yu Zhao and Bai Ying have no idea where its weaknesses are. The torso that should have contained the internal organs is a hollow rib, and the head has been replaced by a thick tentacle that looks like a giant tail. So the two can only attack all the places that seem to be weak. Although the attack worked, the monster is still alive, and its weakness is not there. Crossing Shan conveyed the information to Bai Ying while tightening the battle axe in his hand. Crossing Shan did not rush to launch the attack. Even though the monster looked seriously injured, and the healing speed of the wound became extremely slow, its 2 arms were still swinging flexibly. Just now, it was these 2 seemingly weak things that trapped Crossing Shan, who was using the full body hardening. Why don't we try to deal with it in close combat while it is weak? In the cockpit of Manuscript 03, Bai Ying still did not unlock the missile launcher. It may be luring us. Yu Zhao could not make an accurate judgment. The enemy he was facing now was no different from humans in intelligence. What should we do now? Bai Ying frowned. Even though she knew that what Crossing Shan said might be the truth, she still didn't want to miss this precious opportunity. I'll be close, and you'll be far away. Let's try another coordinated attack. This time, aim at the torso. It shouldn't be able to cope with it. Yu Zhao hesitated for a second, but decided to seize this opportunity. That seemed a little suspicious. He knew that repeating the old trick was very risky, but this conspiracy really took advantage of the number of people to the extreme. If Yu Zhao was replaced by a monster, he couldn't think of any way to take into account both the distance and the front and back. The only risk in this plan was Crossing Shan, whose harden had not yet cooled down, but if he didn't try close combat, the monster would definitely have the spare capacity to deal with the long-range attacks from both sides at the same time. He couldn't wait for harden to cool down, because the monster's regeneration speed was getting faster and faster. If this is a trap, then use its unexpected power to achieve a surprise victory. Overload mode has been activated. Buzz. Crossing Shan could feel the power core suspended in the body suddenly speed up, and a force that surpassed the Mecha itself instantly spread to every nerve of Crossing Shan. Bang bang bang. The swollen black muscles stretched out the armor covering the surface of Crossing Shine one by one, and an extra red plasma axe blade appeared at the end of the black axe handle. Crossing Shine swept the double-headed axe behind him with one hand, and a pair of scalded eyes stared at the monster. Attack. Chapter 105 Beyond the Limit. This was the first time Yuzao had activated the overload mode since completing the skeleton evolution. Compared to simply providing the Mecha with power beyond the rated upper limit, the overload has now become a full-scale biological enhancement of the mechanical life form. Even Yuzao himself did not expect that he would gain such a terrifying power after activating the overload mode. And now, this monster will become the first object for Crossing Shine to test his sword. Boom. When Crossing Shine took his first step, a deep pit suddenly appeared on the originally flat ground. As Crossing Shine's running speed gradually increased, the black giant began to break the sound barrier, and a large amount of air was squeezed and torn along the edge of Crossing Shine's body, forming a circular shock wave that spread outward infinitely. Boom. Until the afterimage left by Crossing Shine along the way dissipated, the belated sonic boom followed the manic airflow and set off a storm that swept everything within a radius of several miles. This was a carnival of sand and gravel in the air. When the wing armor behind the Manuscript 03 had just sent the missile out of the launch hole, Crossing Shine had already held the double-headed giant axe in front of the monster. Just as Yuzao thought, this twisted monster was just pretending to be weak. Just as Crossing Shine took the first step, the monster, sensing the danger, quickly tore off its disguise. The honeycomb-like bullet holes on its trunk began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the broken wounds on its tentacles suddenly grew dense granulations. But for the monster, everything was too late. Even though its flexible arms had tried to stop the black shadow at the first moment, the only thing that greeted these barbs was the air left behind Crossing Shine. In the monster's pile of yellow and rotten eyeballs, the Mecha was just an inconspicuous black dot in the last second, but now his shadow has filled the monster's vision like a magnificent mountain. Swish. The two red plasma axe blades each drew a semicircle in the air, just in time to form a perfect full moon with the red light left in the human eye's vision. The monster didn't even have time to scream, and the vibration from the vocal cords stopped abruptly in the center of the throat filled with plasma. An unknown obstacle has been detected. The tracking trajectory has been corrected. The missile with a blue tail passed by Crossing Shine, who was standing between Manuscript 03 and the monster. Puff. The next second, the monster that was frozen in place was cut in half. Before its twisted and bloated body hit the ground, more than 20 split missiles blew it into a bloody rain and debris in the air. Only then did the monster's spider-like lower body belatedly turn from hard to soft, and fell into a pool of blood. At this moment, the dazzling red dot finally disappeared from the energy radar of Crossing Shine and Manuscript 03. Overload mode has been turned off. Bursts of white smoke rose from Crossing Shine's body, and the swollen black muscles quickly disintegrated, and the double-headed axe in Crossing Shine's hand turned back into a single-headed axe. Due to the overdraft of the overload mode, the current machine performance has been forced to lock at 70% of the standard value, and it is expected to return to the standard level in 1 minute and 24 seconds. Sure enough, there is still a price to pay. Yuzao extinguished the plasma axe blade, and used all the energy in the machine to promote self-repair. Although Crossing Shine has now become a mechanical life form, the overload mode has also changed from overdrafting the power reactor and mechanical parts to overdrafting Crossing Shine's life cells, which to some extent can be regarded as maintaining the original state. It's just that the two overload modes have made a world of difference in the increase of Crossing Shine. Moreover, the new overload mode also has an option to freely control the time, instead of being able to maintain a fixed time after it is activated like before, and it can neither be turned off in advance nor extended when the machine still has spare power. Correspondingly, if Crossing Shine ends the overload mode in advance, the upper limit of the machine's locked power will be higher, and the time to return to normal level will be shorter. But if Crossing Shine chooses to forcibly extend the overload mode, the lower the locked power of the machine will be, and the longer the recovery time will be. However, Yuzao could not extend the overload time indefinitely. Even though Crossing Shine now had a skeleton, the tolerance of the body also had a limit. Once the overload time exceeded this value, it would cause irreversible damage to the body. In severe cases, it would even directly lead to the complete destruction of Crossing Cheyenne. For a moment, I thought you had also turned into a monster. At this time, Beiying had already driven the Manuscript 03 to Crossing Cheyenne's side. With the power you just burst out, I'm afraid you don't need me to coordinate the attack. The monster has a strong regeneration ability. Maybe it can continue to move, even if its head and body are separated. Your missile is just right for finishing off the monster. Yuzao slowly straightened up and looked back at the monster's corpse. The blue flame caused by the missile explosion was still burning in the pool of blood. The monster, which had turned into a pool of rotten meat, had completely lost the opportunity to struggle. You can finish off the monster yourself. Beiying did not accept Yuzao's humble resignation. Do you mean chop it up in batches with an axe, or shoot it into a pulp with a gorilla gun? My efficiency is definitely not higher than yours. Although Yuzao said so, if he really asked him to finish off the monster, he would probably be able to perform operations such as 17 strikes in 3 seconds and a whirlwind meat grinder in overload mode. How many missiles do you have? Yuzao counted the number of ammunition in the Chenglan gorilla gun, and sadly found that he had used up half of the bullets. Enough for 5 volleys. Beiying's ammunition was also not sufficient. We have to use it sparingly. We can't replenish ammunition before encountering a large force. Let me take the lead in the battle when encountering a monster. After saying this, Yuzao moved his eyes to the monster's corpse. Is there anything abnormal? After noticing Crossing Cheyenne's actions, Beiying also observed the monster. I checked it with a scanner. Its cells have lost their activity and the residual energy reaction is also very low. If you are still worried, we can finish off the monster twice. As soon as Beiying finished speaking, he saw Crossing Cheyenne really ignite the axe blade, swing the axe and chop the corpse more than a dozen times. Are you venting your anger? Beiying stared at Crossing Cheyenne in amazement, and the latter seemed ready to chop the meat paste in front of him twice more. Venting anger was the only reasonable reason Beiying could think of, otherwise she could only think of the explanation that Crossing Cheyenne was a pervert. No, I just want to make sure it's really dead. As soon as Crossing Cheyenne finished this sentence, he stretched out his big foot and stepped hard on the few intact pieces of meat. That's enough. Stop stepping on it. Beiying couldn't bear it anymore. In her eyes, Crossing Cheyenne was running rapidly in the opposite direction of normal people. Let's go find Colonel Sato and Aozi quickly. What if they are in danger too? Finally, Crossing Cheyenne stopped whipping the corpse, but not because of Beiying's words. It was because the two of them really received a communication request from Heoji. Chapter 106 The Only Hope. Half an hour ago, in Okioka Prefecture. With their strength, they can definitely protect themselves. I still have some trust in them. In the cockpit of Heoji, Satoyu gave a confident smile to Daozi, who looked worried. Not long ago, when Satoyu and Daozi returned to the outer perimeter of the cave, they found that Crossing Cheyenne and Manuscript 03 had left the farthest communication range. Just by looking at the huge messy footprints on the ground and the broken rocks along the way, Satoyu could already estimate the danger of this monster. A dilemma was placed in front of Satoyu. Should I support Crossing Cheyenne and Manuscript 03 first, or help Kobayashi find medicine first? There is no doubt that the situation on either side is very urgent. If they want to support Crossing Cheyenne and the others, Satoyu and Aozi only need to follow the traces of the battle. But there is an uncertain factor here. That is, the two parties fighting are likely to continue moving. In terms of mobility alone, Heoji can never catch up with Xingqian and Manuscript 03 at full power, which means that once he chooses to support the two, it will take longer than expected. From another perspective, even Heoji, who has undergone modification and enhancement, is the weakest of the three mechas in terms of performance. Although he and Aozi can definitely help, the mecha that can play a decisive role in the battle situation is definitely not Heoji. Kobayashi's request is different. Under the current situation, where they cannot get in touch with Xingqian and others, Sato Zion and Aozi are the only hope for hundreds of elderly people. In contrast, the hospital and the city hall warehouse in Okioka County will not run away by themselves. The distance and time consumed are also fixed. The only two uncertain factors may be the time required to transport the medicine, and whether other mutated level 3 monsters will be encountered on the road. After weighing the pros and cons, Sato Xiang no longer hesitated, and resolutely chose to solve Kobayashi's request first. However, Daozi next to Sato Xiang obviously did not approve of his approach, so he told Daozi about his comparison process. Many people always treat Daozi as a child, only letting her see the results, but not telling her the reasons and processes. But in fact, Daozi can not only understand, but also give a lot of useful suggestions, which is exactly what Sato Xiang wants to see. People cannot rely on others to live all their lives. Even soldiers whose duty is to obey orders should have independent judgment. We are here. Unknowingly, Sato Xiang and Daozi have come to the entrance of a white building complex. According to the instructions on the map, this is the only hospital in the entire Okioka County. Fortunately, the 3 buildings here are not as severely damaged as other buildings in the town, and from the building materials and design specifications, this hospital is obviously a product of the technological revolution. It seems that the Okioka County government still knows that money that should not be saved cannot be saved. Things like this, that protect people's livelihood, must be carried out according to the highest standards. Sato Xiang sighed while driving the Heioji and stepped over the hospital gate and walked into the empty courtyard. Although these medical buildings were built with new age technology, considering the population and town size of Okioka County, these buildings are generally designed to be very short, and the tallest main building can barely reach Heioji's waist. In Sato's eyes, this is also a reasonable way to save money and not waste money. Bean, empty your backpack, we can take as much as we can. Before Sato released the neural synchronization, he carefully checked the history of the energy radar again to make sure that he had not missed any subtle energy fluctuations along the way. Whenever he needed to step out of the Mecha, he would silently envy the equipment of the ground forces in his heart. It would be great if Heioji could also be equipped with 2 small mechas or exoskeleton devices for use by iron pilots. Of course, Sato himself knew that this was an excessive request. After all, the division of labor of the Alliance's combat forces was very clear. For example, when encountering tasks such as shuttling between buildings and carrying supplies, they are usually completed by ground forces in conjunction with small and medium-sized vehicles. After all, the positioning of the Mecha is just a special combat unit against large monsters. Instead of expecting engineers to add other functions to the Mecha, it is better to let others do these jobs directly. After all, the meaning of division of labor is to make everything more efficient. Boom. When Heioji stretched out his hand to the ground in a half-kneeling position, Sato Xiang and Daozi also carried their bags and jumped from the cockpit to the ground. The two walked straight into the main building of the hospital, looked up at the flickering holographic sign in the hall, and found the location of the pharmacy they were going to. The internal medicine pharmacy is on the 4th floor. The elevator seems to be out of service. We have to go up through the fire escape. Sato Xiang took out his pistol and turned on the safety while memorizing the map in his mind. Because he saw a half body and a pool of dried blood not far away. Stay alert, it's not safe here. This time, although Sato and Daozi were always paying attention to the surrounding movements, because there were windows everywhere in the hall and the whole building was bright under the sunlight, the two of them had a wider field of vision and no longer had to tiptoe. Judging from the area and shape of the wound, this person should have been torn in half alive. The attacker was very strong, and it was definitely not done by humans. Sato squatted down with his mouth and nose covered, frowning and examining the body that exuded a foul smell. At this moment, Daozi suddenly patted Sato's shoulder and motioned him to look at a collapsed signboard. Gun? Sato immediately noticed the pistol hidden by the shadow, so he walked up and picked it up. U-57, an old guy from the old times, has long been eliminated by modern armies. Sato skillfully pulled out the magazine and pulled the chamber open, including the one in the chamber. There are a total of 7 bullets left. The slide is seriously worn out, and it's good that it didn't explode. Sato originally wanted to use it as a backup weapon, but found out that it was just a scrap. No shells were found around. It should have been fired when it was attacked. After analyzing this, Satoyu suddenly realized that something was wrong. Ordinary people who have not received military training, the guns they use are all antiques. The scene when he first met Kobayashizuke flashed through his mind. If he remembered correctly, then the pistol that Daozi searched from Kobayashizuke was also a U-57. An indescribable sadness surged into Satoyu's heart, and he could only pray that all this was just a coincidence. Bang! A sudden gunshot broke the silence in the hospital building. There's movement. Hurry upstairs. Chapter 107 The Disappearing Person. Monsters don't shoot, at least the monsters Satoyu has seen don't. In the fire escape, Satoyu and Daozi were taking 2 steps instead of 3, climbing to the upper floors at the fastest speed. He couldn't accurately determine which floor the gunshots came from, but based on the volume they heard on the first floor, the gunshots should come from between the 3rd and 6th floors. Bang! Satoyu kicked open the locked 3rd floor door, and had already pulled the muzzle to the pre-aiming point before entering the corridor, while Daozi was responsible for guarding the direction behind Satoyu. In order to guard against the enemy who might be in front of them, both of them leaned out in a compressed gun holding method for close combat, striving to minimize the risk. However, what greeted the two was an empty corridor. Separate actions. Satoyu and Daozi each began to advance in the direction they were facing, and quickly searched every room and area. Door after door was knocked open by the two, but none of the rooms were the target they were looking for. Just when Sato was about to search the end of the corridor, he suddenly heard a slight sound from upstairs, so he immediately gestured to Daozi at the other end of the corridor, signaling her to stop and not make any sound. Dong dong. Sure enough, when Sato listened carefully, he further confirmed that the sound did come from upstairs, and it seemed to be some kind of irregular knocking sound. With this new clue, Sato immediately pulled Daozi back to the fire escape staircase and headed straight for their original destination, the 4th floor. Stop. In just 10 seconds, the two of them climbed dozens of steps to the 4th floor in a big stride, but what Sato didn't expect was that the entrance to the stairwell on the 4th floor was half open. Looking at the broken glass and bent steel pipes on the ground, Sato could easily infer that the door to this floor must have been blocked before. At the same time, the two heard another sound from the corridor on the 4th floor, a faint and rapid panting sound, and it was very close. The sound was like someone's trachea was cut open, and just listening to it made people worry whether he would suddenly die in the next second. After hesitating for a moment, Sato picked up a steel pipe on the ground that was almost as long as his arm, took out a bundle of thin ropes and a mirror from his backpack, and tied it to one end of the steel pipe. A simple detection device was assembled in this way. After the two confirmed their rise, Daozi pointed the pistol at the position where Sato was about to extend the steel pipe, ready to fire at any time. Sato took a deep breath, put the heavy pistol back into the holster on his waist, held the end of the steel pipe with his own hands, and slowly stretched the end tied with the mirror into the corridor. As the mirror slowly turned, Sato's brows twisted into a ball. A hideous face filled all the space in the mirror. It was a face that was so thin that it looked like a skull. The wrinkled skin was like dried bean skin wrapped on the surface of the skull. Under the flat nose bone were 2 thumb-sized black holes, and yellowed fangs would occasionally appear from the corners of its cracked mouth. What made Sato and Daozi feel most uncomfortable was its swollen dark red eyeballs and its white hair covered with dirt. There was no doubt that the monster looked almost exactly like the ones they found in the Wuju mountain tunnel. Why are they here? Sato resisted the shock and curiosity in his heart and slowly turned the mirror at a slight angle. Only then did he realize that the monster had been cut in half by a fire axe, and there were 2 bullet holes in its shoulder. This was the reason why the monster was so weak and unable to move. In the next 10 seconds, Sato continued to observe the general environment of the entire corridor by adjusting the angle of the mirror and the length of the steel pipe. In addition to the dying monster in front of him, Sato did not find any other threats in the corridor. Move. Swoosh. A sharp tactical dagger was inserted into the monster's head, and after it made a long sound, it stopped moving completely. After dealing with the threat in front of them, Sato and Daozi stood back to back and carefully moved forward to the right side of the corridor. That was the direction from which the collision sound came. Finally, after the two of them came to the corner at the end of the corridor, they found the source of the collision sound. The sprayed bloodstains were painted on the pale wall like oil paintings. The breeze outside the window lifted the dark blue curtains along the broken glass. Two incomplete bodies were lying on the dead monster, and the other one that was still intact was leaning against the door connecting to the inpatient department. Dang dang. The grey door kept hitting the body of the young man, and every shake would cause a few more drops of blood to seep out of the hole in his chest. A water pipe with some paint peeling off was placed between the two door handles, blocking the unknown creature behind the grey door together with the body of the young man. Sato avoided the young man's determined pupils and picked up a blood-stained photo next to the young man from the cold shells on the ground. In the photo, the young man's strong arms were holding a smiling girl, but the two figures had long been stained red by coagulated blood. On the back of the photo, there was a line of beautiful small characters written, Ishimura and Naomiko. There was a small heart drawn between the two names. Satoru took a deep breath, put the bloody photo into the inner pocket of his coat, and then took Daozi to the other side of the corridor again. He had already checked Ishimura's body. The time of death had exceeded 24 hours, and it was impossible that he fired the gun. Instead of mourning for the deceased here, it is better to seize the time to rescue those who are still alive. The two once again checked the rooms in the corridor until all the doors were opened by them. This is the only one left. Satoru and Daozi stood side by side in front of the pharmacy, looking at the wide open medical staff passage on the side and the dirty bloodstains extending all the way inward. Both of them retracted their pistols to their chests and held them at a 30-degree angle parallel to their eyes, with their elbows and shoulders forming a V angle. The space in the pharmacy is narrow, with many obstructions. Each passage only allows one person to pass through, so only close combat or even close combat is possible. Therefore, Sato and Daozi must switch to a posture that can react quickly and even shoot with one hand. Time passed by minute. In order to fully exert their firepower, Sato and Daozi were forced to separate, each keeping a relatively parallel position from the front and back ends of the medicine shelf, and moving forward steadily. Overturned display cabinets, flattened packaging boxes, capsules, and pills scattered on the ground. The two finally passed through the cramped and messy space and saw the explosion-proof door that was out of tune with the surrounding environment in the deepest part of the pharmacy. Sato and Daozi stopped at the dividing line between light and shadow, because in the darkness, there were 4 pairs of bulging eyeballs staring at them. Chapter 108, in front of and behind the door. When the 4 monsters turned around from the darkness, Sato and Daozi saw the gravy and blood stuck to the explosion-proof door. It was a corpse that had been eaten up, and only the fragments of clothing scattered in the bloodstains could prove that the victim was human. Raw. Almost as the monsters were ready to pounce, Sato and Daozi pulled the trigger tacitly without any communication. Bang, bang, bang. The spinning bullet flew out from the hot muzzle, passed through the dividing line between light and darkness, and drilled into the monster's bulging eyeball with boiling temperature. Blood and pus gushed out along the spiral bullet marks, and the monster's forelimbs fell to the ground with a shrill wail before they could touch Sato. The pungent stench and flowing blood spread to Sato's feet, and he shot 2 more shots at the monsters that collapsed on the ground with an expressionless face. On the other side, Daozi, who was only 5 meters away from Satoru, also ended the battle, but the heads of the 2 monsters were crushed into pieces by Daozi's feet. Even though she had changed to the heavy pistol that was standard for pilots, Daozi still wanted to save ammunition as always. According to Kobayashi's description, the medicine should be behind this explosion-proof door. Satoru's eyes swept every corner in front of the explosion-proof door. No weapons or shells were found. The gun was not fired by this person. Both of them looked at the silent explosion-proof door. Satoru once again put the pistol back into the holster on his waist. After Daozi was ready to shoot, he reached out and pulled the wheel on the explosion-proof door. Listening to the sound of the chain turning, the mood of the 2 people became more and more solemn. Gudang. After confirming his eyes with Daozi, Satoru slowly opened the heavy door. No monster suddenly jumped out, and no one shouted that they were saved. Daozi slowly put down the gun in her hand, and there was only endless sadness in her smart eyes. Seeing Daozi's actions, Satoru also walked out from behind the door with a gun. In front of the two of them was a small room illuminated by cold lights. There were 4 rows of neatly arranged shelves, and the shelves were filled with white metal boxes with only labels. Under the row of shelves facing the door, a young girl with desperate eyes was lying motionless. The girl leaned against the blood-stained shelves, her head tilted to her left shoulder, and blood and brain matter kept dripping from the hole in front of her ear and flowing into the pool of blood under her. On her right hand, there was a familiar U-57 pistol to Satoyu. In the entire storage room, Satoyu only found a shell, and there was only 1 bullet missing in the magazine of the U-57. Satoyu took a deep breath. He grabbed the girl's forearm and quietly felt the other's body temperature, which was similar to his own. We are a step late. Whether the two of them accepted it or not, all the clues and evidence pointed to the girl who committed suicide. She was the one who fired the gun. Sato closed his eyes slowly, and countless questions appeared in his mind at this moment. How long had she stayed in this small storage room? Did the person who died outside the door protect her? Before she shot herself, did she have the urge to open the door and face the monster? These questions tortured Sato's heart one after another. The girl's emotions before her death seemed to have been passed to Sato through her forearm. But Sato only knew one thing, which was the only thing he could be sure of. She must have thought that no one would come to save her. But at the moment she fired the gun, Sato and Aozi were only 3 floors away from her. Just when Sato was about to be overwhelmed by self-blame, Daozi suddenly grabbed his hand silently and looked at Sato with her firm eyes. The dead are gone, but there are still living people waiting for us to save them. Sato understood what Daozi wanted to express, so he blinked his eyes hard and forced a smile at Daozi. Encouraged by Daozi, Satoyu got his thoughts back on track. He first searched through the boxes on the 4 shelves and confirmed that they were PM303 oral capsules, type IAT inhibitors, and type second IAT inhibitors from top to bottom. As for the bottom of each shelf, there was only a black metal box with an electronic lock, no label, no other notes. Daozi, pack as many PM303 as you can. Each box of the 2 inhibitors has 24 needles. This thing is easy to break. I'll take it. After checking the objects inside each metal box, Satoyu immediately made a division of labor. According to the situation before the 2 left, most of the elderly in the Wujushin Air Raid shelter were still in the mild stage. According to the doctor's advice that Kobayashi had shown to Satoyu, the demand for PM303 oral medicine was the greatest. But Satoyu was not sure how fast the disease would deteriorate, so he didn't dare to bring less of the 2 types of IAT inhibitors. Let's come back and move 3 more rounds. The amount of medicine here should be enough, so we don't need to go to the city hall warehouse again. Satoyu and Al's bags were already full. As long as the 2 of them didn't take the boxes themselves, they could just empty a shelf in one move. 15 minutes later, the 2 sweating profusely returned to the storage room again, carrying 2 empty backpacks. Satoyu's limbs were so tired that they were numb. Even if the 2 of them tried their best, they could only compress the journey to about 5 minutes. Now was the last round of the 2 people's move. Boom. The banging sounds from the other side of the corridor became more frequent and louder. In fact, ever since he and Aozi shot and killed 4 monsters in the pharmacy, the noise on the other side had become louder. Hurry up. Sato knew that he and Aozi had almost exhausted their physical strength after several trips back and forth. After all, they were carrying 30 kilograms of weight and climbing up and down at the fastest speed. This test was not about the endurance of long-term marching, but how long the body could last in an explosive state. Boom. Listening to the throbbing heart under his chest, Sato could no longer care about handling it with care and could only quickly pour the inhibitors into his bag. Dozens of small medicines collided with each other, making a crisp sound of ping pong, and Sato could only hope that these glass bottles were hard enough not to break because of his rough dumping. Let's go. After the last box of inhibitors was emptied, Sato immediately closed the bag and took the lead in pushing Daozi out of the pharmacy. After hesitating for a second, he took the black metal box at the bottom of the shelf. Although Satoyu didn't know what was in it, everything that could be placed in this storage room must be related to the strange disease, perhaps something to deal with the worst case scenario. However, just as the 2 were about to run out of the pharmacy, they heard that desperate sound. Bang. It was the sound of the door on the other side of the corridor slamming against the wall. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109 Fatal Gamble. Roar. Countless piercing roars echoed on the walls on both sides of the corridor, overlapping each other, making all the sounds sound like the echoes of the same individual. The walls, floor tiles, ceiling, everything in the corridor was shaking in the high-frequency vibration, and even the pills scattered at Sato's feet began to move on the smooth ground. At this moment, Sato's mind had only one thought. They were in trouble. Boom, boom, boom. As countless collisions sounded in the ears of the two people, a brown seawater suddenly gushed out from the corner at the end of the corridor. Countless monsters trampled on their own kind with their slender limbs like crazy. Even if these monsters would be torn to pieces, they would not hesitate. The densely packed crawlers filled the narrow passage like a tide, rushing towards Sato and Elsie, who had just stepped out of the pharmacy at a speed far beyond the limit of human beings. Run. The conditioned reflex formed by countless actual combat and training made Sato's Ayang regain his sanity from shock and fear. He grabbed Elsie, who was still in a daze, and pushed her into the fire escape first. Plop. Before the monsters rushed to him, Sato's Ayang followed Elsie and ran into the fire escape at the fastest speed, closed the half-open door, picked up the steel pipe on the ground, and inserted it between the two door handles. The next second, a huge head squeezed out from the broken door and window and opened its bloody mouth full of fangs to Sato's Ayang. At the critical moment, Elsie suddenly grabbed the bag behind Sato's Ayang and forcibly pulled him back a few steps before the monster's claws were about to touch him. Go downstairs. Sato's Ayang didn't have time to thank Elsie now. The two ran down the corridor like desperate rabbits. Bang. Just a few seconds later, the bent steel pipe was broken in the middle by the impact of the monster and completely turned into two pieces of scrap metal. The bloated monsters were like a group of headless flies rushing around in the stairwell, but this did not affect their movement downwards at an exaggerated speed. Damn it. Elsie, throw away the bag. Almost at the same time as giving the order to Elsie, Sato also threw away his backpack. After unloading the biggest burden on his body, the pace of the two people instantly became much faster. Instead of gambling on whether they can escape with these two bags of medicine, it is better to ensure that the two of them are still alive and can drive the Heoji to send the medicines they took back before. Roar. At this moment, a monster that tried to take a shortcut by jumping down was stuck on the top of Sato's head, but its claws could not reach Sato's shoulders, so it could only keep grinning at him. Bang. Out of instinct, Sato directly smashed the monster's head into a ball of blood before his brain turned around. However, the monsters rushing down the stairs were only 2 seconds slower than the one that jumped down. Looking at the first floor hall so close, Sato's heart was about to jump out of his chest. His body was on the verge of limit. Every time he took a step forward, every inch of muscle in his body would feel sore and swollen under the heavy load. Breathe, breathe. Sato tried his best to put his nervousness and fear behind him and shifted all his attention to his own rapid breathing. This was his usual way to stay focused and the best way for him to deceive his body. But the roar and footsteps of the monsters getting closer and closer were a fact that even Sato could not escape, even if he covered his ears. Even though the two had already run into the first floor hall, the swarming monsters also poured into this open space together. There were too many. Sato resisted the urge to turn around and shoot. He knew it was meaningless. If he had a Vulcan machine gun in his hand, he might have hesitated. But he only had a heavy pistol in his hand. Facing such an exaggerated number of monsters, the bullets he fired could only fall on deaf ears. Think of a way, think of a way. Sato was chasing Elsie in front of him with all his strength, while desperately thinking of any possible way to stop the monsters. He knew very well that he would be torn into pieces by the monsters behind him before he got on the Mecha. But in this bright and empty hospital hall, there was nothing that Sato could use. Light, sunlight. In a flash, Sato had no time to aim and could only shoot at the dome glass above his head. After more than a dozen gunshots, the glass on the top of the hall finally broke completely. Crash. The broken glass poured down like a galaxy, hitting the floor of the hall and scattering everywhere. The fierce sunlight hit Satoru directly, almost making him unable to open his eyes. A dozen monsters, that had no time to break, were suddenly exposed to the direct sunlight. They immediately covered their heads with their slender forelimbs, fell to the ground, and twitched one after another, and soon they stopped moving completely. Satoru guessed right. Since the whole building is a product of the technological revolution, composite coated glass was used in its construction. This kind of glass can not only greatly reduce the intensity of ultraviolet rays, but also has the effect of heat and low temperature resistance, and also maintains mild light transmittance, thanks to humans themselves. After the planetary environment has deteriorated to this point, there are no creatures that can be directly exposed to the sun without any protection. In fact, Satoru had already noticed this in the several encounters between the two and the monsters. Although they are attracted by strong light, they are very afraid of strong light. It is precisely because of this fear that they want to extinguish the light source itself at all costs. Satoru and Owzy used flashlights, so the monsters knew that, as long as they killed the person holding the flashlight, it would be equivalent to destroying the light source. Although the hospital's glass filtered out the strong light, the monsters didn't know how to cover the windows, which was why the 4 monsters in the pharmacy retreated to the shadows. But this filtered sunlight only made the monsters feel disgusted at best, which was evident from the fact that they attacked the 2 people in the sunlight. So Satoru made a bet, and he wanted to let the scorching sun, which even humans couldn't stand, shine directly into the hall. If he made a wrong bet, it would prove that the monsters were only afraid of the strong light, not because a strong light would cause any physical harm to them. It was just that the price of the wrong bet became his life, but even if he didn't do this, he would never be able to escape. In his own words, this bet was a sure win. After all, the probability of death was higher anyway, so it was better to struggle. Maybe there was still a glimmer of hope. Finally, the 2 ran out of the hospital hall safely. Satoru looked at the group of monsters huddled in the shadows, panting, and then raised the gun in his hand and aimed at the monster that almost caught him just now. Bang! After a gunshot, the monster fell wailing on the boundary between sunlight and shadow. Chapter 110 Other People's Hell. In the damp and cold tunnel, Sato and Owzy each carried a heavy bag and moved forward step by step towards the blockade area. Sweat slid down Sato's tough jaw into his combat uniform, causing his body temperature to fluctuate between hot and cold. This torture aggravated his physical fatigue. Listening to the rustling sound of military boots stepping on debris and dust, Sato's vision became increasingly blurred. "We're almost there, hold on a little longer." Sato seemed to be talking to Owzy, but in fact it was more like comforting himself. Compared to Sato, who relied purely on his will to control his body, Owzy looked much more relaxed. Although she sweated no less than Sato, her body had long recovered from the soreness and fatigue, and had adapted to the normal state of carrying a heavy load. Sato certainly knew the gap between him and Owzy, just as he thought in the hospital 20 minutes ago the only one who couldn't escape the clutches of the monster was him, but Owzy could definitely sit safely in the cockpit of Hyoji. This huge contrast sometimes makes Satoru fall into self-doubt. Is he protecting Owzy, or is Owzy protecting him? Dang dang. The 2 stopped in front of a familiar fork in the road. "Owzy, did you hear any sound?" Satoru raised his right hand, signaling Owzy not to make any sound. Dang dang. Although the sound was very small, in the empty tunnel, this subtle sound could still be clearly captured by Satoru and Owzy. Owzy immediately nodded vigorously at Satoru. Dang dang. To the right, it's the direction of the closed area. Satoru frowned. In addition to the old man, Kobayashi is the only person who can move freely in the blockade area. The sound can be transmitted to such a far tunnel, which means that the blockade area must be making a big noise. Go and have a look. The worry about the safety of others, and the sense of responsibility for his own mission instantly surged into Satoru's heart. This spirit from the bones of a soldier allowed him to temporarily overcome all kinds of physical discomfort and get back into the running posture. The heavy bag bounced up and down with Sato's pace. Sato opened his mouth and tried to adjust his breathing while pulling out the heavy pistol in the holster and opening the safety. The two quickly passed through the area where they had fought with the monster before. Fortunately, they did not find any new enemies lingering here. It took Sato and Ozzy only 1 minute to run the entire 300-meter distance. Looking at the tightly closed explosion-proof door in front of him, Sato pulled the wheel on the door without saying a word, opening the last obstacle blocking the two from the blockade. Gulp. When the explosion-proof door was completely opened, Sato and Ozzy once again welcomed the depressing sight. The silent old people still curled up their bodies, hiding in the narrow corner to avoid the weak light from above their heads. Their eyes became more empty and soulless compared to the last time, as if they were staring at Sato and Ozzy just out of an irresistible instinct. This invisible despair weighed on Sato like a mountain, forcing him to lower his breathing and forget about shouting Kobayashi's name. Boom. The two of them walked quickly through the dark and crowded passage, passing by rows of eyes that looked like those seeing off the dead. The noises in their ears became louder and louder. They had guessed that it was the sound of something hitting the steel with all its might. Finally, Sato and Ozzy found Kobayashi's covered in blood in the corner at the end of the corridor. Hey, can you hear me? Wake up. Sato quickly threw down his backpack, rushed forward, and grabbed Kobayashi's sweaty face with both hands. Commander Sato. Kobayashi struggled to open his eyelids and looked at Sato with a pair of pupils that were about to scatter. Ozzy, get the first aid kit quickly, he needs to be bandaged. Sato slowly laid Kobayashi's body flat on the ground, and during this time he kept covering the torn wound on his abdomen with his hands. Boom. The deafening sound of impact echoed in the ears of the three people. The sound came from the room where the critically ill patients were isolated before. At this moment, the irregular impact sound was like two drumsticks, hitting Sato's heart heavily. You'll be fine. Bear with it, we have to help you treat your wound first. When saying this, Sato had already taken out a bottle of hydrogen peroxide from the first aid kit and stuffed a clean white towel into Kobayashi's mouth. Woo. Before Kobayashi was ready, he felt a burning pain in his abdomen. If Sato hadn't pressed down his thighs and hands in advance, he would have made the wound bigger and bigger in his struggle. You did a great job. You are braver than many soldiers I have seen. Sato encouraged Kobayashi's while trying to divert his attention. I have good news for you. We brought all the medicine back, and everyone here can be saved. Kobayashi bit the towel in his mouth tightly and dared not open his eyes again because at this time, Ozzy was using her hands wearing disposable gloves to put a medical cotton ball soaked in hydrogen peroxide into his wound. That's it. You are a real man. Sato watched Ozzy quickly deal with the wound and then took out a can of condensation spray for coagulation of blood and paralysis of pain and sprayed it directly on Kobayashi's bloody wound. After feeling the numbness and coolness from the wound, Kobayashi instantly felt that he was not in so much pain. Good job. Sato stood up from Kobayashi's legs and then cooperated with Ozzy to tie gauze and medical tape to Kobayashi's wound. Thank you. At this time, Kobayashi's face was pale, so that his smile even looked a little creepy under his pale skin. But fortunately, he still saved his life. No need to thank you. Come, take the medicine first. Sato took out his water bottle, picked out half a green pill from the first aid kit, and fed it to Kobayashi. This is an oral medicine that is only used when soldiers are seriously injured. After taking it, it can not only accelerate cell regeneration in a short time, but also play a role in maintaining mental excitement. However, this oral medicine has strong side effects. Users are likely to experience symptoms such as neurasthenia and hallucinations after the effect of the medicine wears off, and will develop a strong dependence on the drug. Captain Sato, Miss Ozzy, I'm sorry. I didn't take good care of them. Kobayashi had just swallowed the pill when tears welled up in his eyes. We are late. Sato gently stroked Kobayashi's forehead with his hand. It's not your fault, it's me. I can't hide it any longer. I have to tell you about this. Kobayashi's eyes were filled with despair and regret. Boom. Boom. The violent crashing sounds seemed to be mixed with some shrill screams. They are monsters. Chapter 111 Me Files. Zzz. After Kobayashizuke said this, the lights above the three people's heads also flickered a few times. There is no doubt that the they Kobayashizuke mentioned refers to the 20 or so elderly people behind the explosion-proof door. So after the third stage, the elderly will all turn into monsters, am I right? Satoyu actually had a premonition in his heart, but when Kobayashizuke really admitted it to him, he still had a lot of waves in his heart. Yes. Kobayashizuke's face was gradually becoming ruddy at this time, and his body was able to exert strength. I've never heard of any virus that can turn a normal person into an hideous monster. I hope you can explain this to me later. Satoyu's expression became very serious, but now we have more important things to do. Can you move? I think it should be fine. Kobayashizuke pulled his arm out of Satoyu's hand and stood firm little by holding onto the wall. I'm sorry, Commander Sato and Miss Dowsey, I only know part of the information about this matter, but I'm willing to tell you everything I know. We'll talk about the intelligence later. Take this. Satoyu took Dowsey's backpack to his side and took out 10 white packaged medicine boxes from it. Now let the old people take PM303. Although Satoyu was very suspicious of the specific ingredients of PM303 and the two types of it inhibitors, emergency rescue was the most important thing at the moment. Regardless of whether these medicines contained hidden dangers, the three of them must rely on them to curb the old people's condition first. Dowsey, Kobayashi, you two, help the old people take the medicine first. I'll prepare the IT inhibitor and the syringe. Satoyu had to prepare for the worst. After all, he couldn't be sure whether the old people's condition had already transitioned to the second stage. Okay. After Dowsey and Kobayashi took away enough PM303 and drinking water, Satoyu opened his backpack and took out a blue metal syringe and a small can of type I inhibitor. This blue metal syringe is a medical device specially developed by Omega. It not only uses a special filter material that allows the needle to be automatically disinfected after use to achieve the effect of reuse, but also has a detector installed in the syringe. As long as liquid is poured into it, its composition will be displayed in the form of a holographic projection. Let me see what you are. Satoyu skillfully used a syringe to empty a small can of type I inhibitor and patiently waited for the results. Ding ding ding. As the resolution of the detector became higher and higher, a series of compounds with long names popped up. In fact, Satoyu didn't know these compounds. If the network connection was normal, he might be able to click on them to check the specific effects. But at this time, Satoyu could only judge the degree of danger of these compounds by the colors displayed by the names. Blue, blue, blue. Satoyu's eyes swept across the compound graphics floating in the air. Blue means that the composition and dosage of these compounds are within the safe range that the human body can accept. Just when the resolution was about to reach 100%, Satoyu's pupils suddenly reflected a dazzling red. Me files. Looking at the compound information emitting a dark red light in front of him, Satoyu slowly clenched his fist. Even if Satoyu is not a professional medical staff, he knows how dangerous this famous Me files is. Me files was discovered in the first decade after the fourth technological innovation and was named after its creator, Dr. Me files. This compound, which is called changing modern medicine, has only one effect, which is to accurately identify any living substance and inhibit its activity or directly kill it by reversing or destroying its material structure. Since Me files is a product of gene editing, it has strong plasticity and can be designed as a targeted medical treatment for a certain substance. Even viruses and cancer will succumb to it. Ironically, it is precisely because of this characteristic of Me files that it has become a nightmare for all life. In the second decade of technological innovation, a full 13 politicians died from poisoning caused by Me files compounds. It was also from then on that Me files compounds became the most strictly controlled thing in countries around the world. As long as ordinary citizens were found to be in possession of Me files, no matter how much the dose was, they would face the most severe scrutiny and accusations. Even today, with the existence of the Watcher Alliance, the production, circulation, and use of Me files are one of the most open and transparent data in the world, and are supervised by various countries. If Me files exists in type I inhibitors, then there will be no less in type second. Satoyu's face became extremely serious, let alone small medical institutions. Even multinational medical giants can't buy the equipment needed to make me files. How could such a thing exist in the special medicine of Okioka County? Ding. While Sato was thinking about the ins and outs of the matter, the syringe also completed the component test of type I inhibitor. What is this? A blurry black substance appeared in front of Sato. It looked like it had no stable structure of artificial compounds, and even the syringe could not analyze its specific composition. Since Sato knew that there was such a thing as a syringe, he had never seen any substance marked as black. Because black represents the unknown. Suddenly, Sato felt a layer of cold sweat on his back, as if something dangerous was approaching him. This was an instinct he had developed after years of military service. Sato took a deep breath, and then turned his head 70 degrees. Behind him, there were 9 old men like statues staring at the syringe in Sato's hand. This was the first time Sato saw emotions other than despair in their eyes, joy, fear, and uncontrollable desire. It was not until then that Sato discovered that the eyeballs of these old men were already covered with scarlet bloodshot, as if they had not closed their eyes for 3 days and 3 nights. Dong dong. Boom. Hearing the loud noise of the explosion-proof door being hit by the monster, Satoyu slowly stood up and slowly moved the syringe in his hand behind his back. At the same time, his other hand reached for the holster behind his waist after dialing Kobayashi's call. What's wrong? Commander Sato. Kobayashi's, who answered the call first, seemed a little confused. Did the doctor tell you that the elderly will show aggression after the disease enters the second stage? Chapter 112 Revitalization. Hold him down. As soon as Satakshin finished speaking, Daozi took out the prepared rope and quickly tied the old man's hands together. The old man's bloodshot eyes stared at Daozi fiercely, but the most terrifying thing was not these eyes, but the calm expression on the old man's face. Sorry, old man. Satakshin saw the opportunity, grabbed the old man's arm, that was still trembling slightly, and pushed the syringe in his hand into the other's blood vessel. As the needle was pulled out from under the old man's skin, the old man who originally wanted to struggle began to become calm, and even the pair of eyeballs that were about to fall out of the eye sockets shrank in size, until they were gradually covered by the eyelids. Seeing that the old man had closed his eyes, Daozi took his hands off the old man's calves, and cleanly untied the rope on the old man's hands. I can see the itchy skin and difficulty in eye movement, but I didn't notice the weakness. Satakshin pressed the storage button on the syringe, and wiped the sweat from his forehead with his hand. So far, he and Daozi have injected 46 elderly people with type I inhibitors, and the patient just now was the last one to be identified as entering the second stage. The silver needle quickly retracted into the container, and the unfolded structure on the syringe was folded together. The whole syringe finally became a neat little cylinder, which was put into the medical bag by Satoyu. I have seen other elderly people injected with this inhibitor in the hospital before. At that time, their hands and feet were also tied to the bed for injection. But in addition to the injection time, the elderly did have symptoms of weakness all over the body. Kobayashi scratched his head a little embarrassedly. In view of the fact that he had suffered a big injury in his abdomen, Satoyu and Daozi could only give injections to the elderly themselves. But Kobayashi was not completely helpless. He was responsible for following behind the 2 people, carrying a bag full of type I inhibitors. Fortunately, the 3 people needed to stop every few steps to give injections to the elderly. Most of the time, Kobayashi did not need to carry a bag weighing dozens of kilograms. When he stopped, he would put it on the ground. Despite this, Kobayashi, who was a little weak, was still sweating. This is not called being weak all over, this is called hibernation. Satoyu was so tired that he sat down on the ground. The elderly who have entered the second stage have lost their rationality. They are acting completely according to biological instincts. However, this instinct is not human instinct, but the instinct of monsters. This is the best explanation that Satoyu could think of. He also relied on observing which elderly people would show desire for him holding a syringe to determine who needed to be injected with type I inhibitor. Daozi, keep an eye on the timer. PM 303 should be taken every 4 hours. The elderly have 2 more today. Dowsey nodded and projected a timing panel accurate to milliseconds in the air to prove that he had indeed been paying attention to this matter. Okay, you are worthy of being Dowsey. It seems that I'm too long-winded. Satoyu gave Dowsey an affirmative smile and then turned to look at Kobayashi's. While the old people's illness is under control, you can simplify your language and tell us everything you know. Okay. Can you let me think about it first? Although Kobayashi agreed very readily, it was obvious that he was not ready yet. Of course. Satoyu had seen many situations like Kobayashi before. Even if people have crossed that threshold psychologically, when they really need to speak, the inertial obstacles from the depths of their hearts will revive again. After all, people are the most fickle animals in the world. Maybe he is really sincere when he surrenders to you, but when he regrets and stabs you, it can also be from the heart. Don't have too much psychological burden. Dowsey and I just want to help you solve the problem. Satoyu knew that what he had to do at this time was to slowly push Kobayashi from behind and not be too eager for success. Captain Sato is right, and if it weren't for you, I would have been torn to pieces by the old men. Kobayashi showed a bitter smile on his face. Protecting humanity is the duty of every member of the Watcher Alliance. Don't worry, we will neither record nor tell anyone what you are going to say. If anyone really asks, we will say that Dowsey and I discovered it ourselves. Kobayashi did not respond to Satoyu's words, but instead lowered his head to his knees and hugged his calves with both hands. Satoyu did not speak again. He just waited patiently for Kobayashi to finish his inner struggle. Because he knew that the more he told the other party not to feel pressured at this time, the more likely the other party would think in the opposite direction about the serious consequences of informing on the other party. Boom. Boom. The collision sound from the end of the corridor still echoed in the entire closed area all the time, but the three of them had already regarded this sound as part of this place. Then let me start with the work I have done. Sorry, I haven't been able to organize my thoughts yet, so what I said may be a little confusing. After a long silence, Kobayashi finally raised his head again and bravely met Satoyu's eyes with his eyes. It's okay, we understand. Satoyu also responded with an encouraging smile. 6 years ago, after I returned to Okioka Prefecture, I applied for the newly established Revitalization Bureau. But when I actually started working, I found that the work of the Revitalization Bureau was more difficult than I thought, because not many young people were willing to work in Okioka Prefecture, so the newly established Revitalization Bureau was also composed of old employees from other departments. They have long been accustomed to a routine life, and they don't care about the assessment indicators that the Revitalization Bureau has to undergo every quarter. The result is conceivable. Because they failed to meet the economic indicators required by the above, the Revitalization Bureau laid off 2/3 of its employees after the first assessment. That's right, 2/3, not transferred from the post, but dismissed. It was not until then that the people in the city hall realized that the central government was serious this time. They no longer had a stable job. If they did not do their job well, they would be kicked out. I was promoted to assistant soon after my outstanding performance before the first quarter assessment. I thought this was a good opportunity for me to show my skills, but I did not expect that they just needed one person to shoulder all the responsibilities. At this point, Kobayashi's face was full of reluctance. But you also maintained the survival of Okioka County, didn't you? Satoyu tried to comfort the other party. No, Commander Sato, such an Okioka County cannot be considered alive at all. Everyone here, including me, is just a walking corpse. Chapter 113 The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead. Satoyu repeatedly chewed on the word thrown by Kobayashi. Just from the excitement shown by the other party, he knew that this matter was definitely not as simple as he imagined. The economic indicators issued by the higher-ups cannot be met at all. At least Okioka County cannot do it. The population of Okioka County has been flowing out, and the people who still live here are all elderly people, and there is no economic recovery. What can a town without any natural resources and surrounded by mountains attract talents? I often wonder, if humans had not launched the fourth technological revolution, would towns like Okioka County still survive better? At least at that time, Mount Kiri was still a beautiful place, and many people were willing to spend money to come here for vacation. But now Okioka County has nothing. It is a completely dead city, a place name that will be wiped off the map sooner or later. At that time, I had just been promoted to assistant. I couldn't sleep all night for that month, but I couldn't think of any way to save Okioka County. During the few days when I took leave to recuperate at home, the governor suddenly called me and said that a large medical group had investigated the soil in Okioka Prefecture and found that it was very suitable for growing a new type of medicinal material they had developed. Because this is a major event that may change the economic destiny of this county, they immediately approached me as an assistant in the revitalization agency. Hearing this, Satoyu's eyes gradually became sharper. As an outsider, he could easily see that this was a trap, but for Kobayashi-suke, who was feeling a lot of pressure at the time, this trap looked like pie in the sky. Chief Sato must think I'm ridiculous. How could such a good thing be handed to me? Even if the governor doesn't take over the matter personally, it should be given to the director general who has a closer relationship with him, rather than me, an assistant who is only a deputy. In fact, I later realized something, so I went to look up information about this group, and found that it was indeed, as the governor said, a large medical group with investments all over the world, but the information disclosed by this group was limited to this. Can you tell me the name of this group? Satoyu knew that this was the most critical information, so he needed to know it clearly. Gemini Biomedical Group. Kobayashi-suke hesitated for a moment, but still said the name of the group. Okay, I remember it, you go on. After hearing Kobayashi-suke's answer, Satoyu found that he had indeed heard of this medical giant from Hain. But if he asked whether the Gemini group had left a deep impression on him, he really couldn't remember. The day after I received the call, a representative from the Gemini group came to Okioka County to meet me. He was also from Zori, but I didn't know his real name. It was only after I found out that something was wrong that I checked and found out that his identity was legally forged. My negotiation with him lasted for 3 days. He directly took out a set of finished products, which was completely in line with the new commercial law that the coalition government had just promulgated. During this negotiation, I almost only played the role of signing and approving. Now I think I was completely led by the nose. Less than 2 days after the matter was finalized, the Gemini group arrived in Okioka County with a transport fleet and personnel, and started a series of construction projects and soil transformation experiments. According to them, because it involves commercial secrets, everyone living in Okioka County has signed a confidentiality agreement with the Gemini group. At that time, I roughly calculated that the money each person received from the contract alone was equivalent to the income of white-collar workers in the urban circle for 5 years. After the end of the second quarter, our revitalization department not only exceeded the indicators required by the above, but also received praise from the central government as a model town. Not long after, the Gemini group publicly released recruitment information to local residents. These jobs were easy jobs that even the elderly could do. They were nothing more than helping to take care of the experimental plants cultivated by the Gemini group, but the salaries offered were shockingly high. With the income from the previous confidentiality contract, almost all the elderly in the county participated in the Gemini group's experiments. Later, I learned that it was not an experimental plant at all, but a highly addictive compound raw material. Looking at the blue veins on Kobayashi's forehead, Satoyu couldn't help but clench his fists. In the last week of the third quarter, people from the Central Procuratorate found me. They confidently produced dozens of documents, accusing me of helping the Gemini group engage in illegal economic activities. My mind was blank at the time. The prosecutor told me that what we were dealing with was just a shell company under the Gemini group. He asked me to continue to cooperate with the Gemini group on the condition of exempting me from guilt, but I must collect corresponding intelligence and evidence in accordance with the requirements of the Procuratorate and submit them to them regularly. This is asking you to be a spy. Satoyu gave a very clear conclusion. I can only do what the prosecutor says, otherwise I will never have the chance to take care of my grandma again. Kobayashi's lips trembled slightly. But it's not easy to get information about the Gemini group. At that time, I asked for further cooperation, but they also gave corresponding conditions. What conditions? My brother's bones. Why do you want your brother's bones? Sato, you never thought that the Gemini group would make such a request. I don't know, they didn't tell me the reason, but my brother doesn't have any bones at all. He was eaten by a monster, and there is nothing in the coffin. Maybe it's because they know that your brother has no bones that they put forward this condition. Sato Yu helplessly said his guess in his opinion. This is a very ironic rejection, but I have been exposed. From the moment I asked for further cooperation with them, I knew I had done a big stupid thing. Half a year, they only stayed in the last half a year and left Okioka County. Before leaving, they dismantled all the facilities they had built, leaving only one piece of evidence that I could never tell the prosecutor. At this point, Kobayashi's tears had already burst out. If you don't want to say it, I won't force you. Sato Yu unexpectedly made a concession. No, Commander Sato. If you don't say it, I'm afraid I won't have a chance in the future. Kobayashi wiped his eyes with his sleeves. They have infected all the elderly with the experimental products, and unless they are controlled with the drugs they provide, the elderly will turn into monsters. Chapter 114 Unknown Target. Colonel Sato, how is the situation over there? Crossing Shine and Manuscript 03 still stayed beside the monster's muddy corpse, waiting for each other's answer. But strangely, Heoji did not respond to Crossing Shine's words. Colonel Sato? After waiting for dozens of seconds, Beiying couldn't help asking. Her response was still silence. Feeling something was wrong, Yuzio checked the communication channel, but he found that there was no problem with the signal stability or transmission distance. Is Heoji in danger? Beiying, who was standing in the cockpit of Manuscript 03, seemed a little anxious. When she said this, the communication channel between the two and Heoji was still connected. Turn off the communication first. Hearing Yuzio's suggestion, Beiying's pupils suddenly shrank, and he immediately cut off the communication connection from Heoji. Check your energy radar to see if it shows Heoji's location. No. Beiying then noticed that his radar visible map was actually blank. Neither do I. Yuzio's tone gradually became cold. Although the longest communication distance between mechas is normally farther than the maximum detection range of the radar, don't forget our current situation. The fourth line of Deaf and Silence are in a state of signal interference. We can only use short-range communication, and at this distance, it is impossible not to be detected by the energy radar. Beiying continued what Yuzio wanted to say, and I just sent a text message to Heoji. Even if their voice system is broken, they can at least transmit information in text form. Didn't they reply to you? If they did, I wouldn't let you cut off the communication. At this time, Yuzio had reignited the red plasma axe blade, and his body had completed self-repair and returned to normal power levels. What is this? Ghost communication. Beiying's mind suddenly popped up some irrelevant thoughts, and she could feel a large patch of goosebumps on her neck. When I was fighting the Ghost King that was parasitized by the heretic, I found that the monster could use the communication device of the parasitic Mecha, and even use our language. Yuzio, who was in the consciousness space at this time, was looking down at the memory of that time like watching a movie. At that time, the heretic thought he had won, so he used the Ghost King's communication device to send me a text message to taunt me. What did it send? Beiying's attention was instantly diverted to curiosity about the content. Human, stupid. Yuzio sent a text message to Beiying intact, and then added, maybe it wanted to say that I was stupid for failing. Although it looks like a child who has not learned how to express himself fluently in language, it is no different from humans in terms of cunningness in battle. You mean, the communication request we just received may also be sent by the monster Mecha? In fact, when Beiying was driving Manuscript 03 to fight the Red Hurricane that was parasitized by the mutant siren, she also found that the intelligence level of the monster was rising rapidly. It's very likely. Otherwise, with Colonel Sato's style of doing things, he would never leave the communication hanging without saying a word, not to mention that Heoji hasn't appeared on the radar yet. However, at the same time that Yuzio said this, the energy radars of the two people simultaneously detected an unknown energy reaction. Warning, unknown energy fluctuations detected. Energy level 4. Is it coming? Beiying also drove the manuscript 03 without hesitation and took a fighting stance, and together with Crossing Shan, he pointed the front to the direction where the energy fluctuation appeared. But as time passed, the two were surprised to find that the attack they imagined did not come. It's not within the visual range. The opponent seems to have not moved since it appeared. Beiying looked at the bare hills and gullies and frowned. If we analyze it according to the previous battle experience with the Ghost King, the opponent can use Heoji's communication, which means that Heoji has been parasitized by the monster. Yuzao had to say the worst case in his mind first. Then Daozi and Colonel Sato are. Beiying tightly grasped the two high-frequency hot swords in his hands. We should take the initiative to attack. Wait a minute. Crossing Shan held his giant axe in front of manuscript 03. If it is a monster mecha, the system will not identify it as an unknown energy fluctuation, but directly determine it as a hostile mecha. What does that mean? Although Beiying has tried her best to restrain her emotions and calm down, when she thought that Daozi might be in danger now, the only thought in her mind was to save people. It means that the monster we are facing may just simulate the signal of the hero, and it is luring us. Although Yuzao said this, he could not guarantee whether his guess was accurate. Do you believe this when you say it? Beiying's questioning made Yuzao speechless. Ding ding. Just as the two were arguing, the unknown target that had been stationary suddenly moved. It is moving away from us. Yuzao's brain suddenly became blank for a moment, and he could not understand the meaning of the other parties doing this. But he understood it the next second. But manuscript 03 suddenly pushed away the giant axe in front of it and rushed directly to the direction of the unknown target at full power. White Shadow. Yuzao, who had never expected White Shadow to do such an impulsive behavior, didn't care about so much. He could only pick up the giant axe in his hand and follow behind manuscript 03 at full speed. If we don't chase it, it will be out of the radar detection range. White Shadow drove the mecha at full speed and shouted at Crossing Shan, who was following behind him. If it doesn't come at us, doesn't it prove that this is a trap? Yuzao's thoughts at this moment were also a mess. He tried desperately to sort out all the clues, but found that he and White Shadow had too little information. Since the two separated from Heoji, the only thing they have done is to defeat the disgusting and crazy level 4 monster, and because they chose guerrilla tactics at the beginning, their current location is already a million miles away from the Wuju Mountain air raid shelter. They had no idea what happened to Satoyu and Daozi during this period, and whether they were really attacked by monsters. We have to break through, even if it's a trap, otherwise what will happen to Colonel Sato and Daozi? Beiying pointed out the most critical point. At the same time, manuscript 03 also completed the armor transformation, and the entire body switched to the running mode. Damn it. Yuzao couldn't find a reason to refute Beiying, so he could only try his best to keep up with the pace of manuscript 03. Since neither of them could convince the other, the only way to prove who was right and who was wrong was to see it with their own eyes. Chapter 115 Flesh and Blood Mecha. We are approaching Wuju Mountain. Yuzao focused most of his attention on maintaining the rapid running of the machine, while occasionally taking a glance at the blue holographic topographic map on his face. After about 5 minutes of full-scale pursuit, the distance between the unknown target and the two was almost within the visible range. But Yuzao still had to sight the opponent's moving speed. Although Crossing Shan did not turn on the overload mode, the fact that Crossing Shan and manuscript 03 could spend such a long time at full power and focusing on moving at the same time was enough to show the terrifying degree of the opponent's mobility. The good news is that, although the unknown target's moving direction is not directly heading towards Wuju Mountain, it is also approaching Wuju Mountain, which gives Yuzao a glimmer of hope to confirm the information of the hero. Beiying, get ready for contact. We will see the target soon. I know. With Yuzao's kind reminder, Beiying controlled manuscript 03 to transform again, switching the entire machine from the running mode back to the balanced mode. Over there, the mountains and ridges passed by quickly in Crossing Shan's red eyes. The desolate hills were like the spines of a dead person, stretching out in an uneven manner towards the endless distance. A blood-red figure suddenly appeared among the rocks covered by dust and loess. Is that Heoji? The moment he saw the figure, Beiyang almost tripped over his stiff limbs. No. It's just a monster that looks like Heoji. Yuzao was no less shocked than Beiyang, because in his opinion, this was more terrifying than seeing the parasitic Heoji. It was a dark red giant running, and its height was almost the same as Heoji, and it was estimated to be about 75 meters. Not only the height, but the appearance of this giant was also surprisingly similar to Heoji. Its body showed a sharp industrial feel, and each piece of chitinous shell covering the surface of the body corresponded to the external armor of Heoji's body, showing a wild style. The giant also has 4H4 burning heavy cannons on its waist, and every time it raises its feet to run, Yuzao can see the explosive foot spikes located in the center of its feet, which are used to stabilize the body's center of gravity and strengthen its grip. However, this giant, who almost perfectly replicates the appearance of the hero, is made up of a substance that is completely opposite to the cold metal, bones, and flesh. Even though the two sides have not yet officially broken out in battle, judging from the opponent's exaggerated movement speed, it has already surpassed the hero's body. Be careful, this thing may be more powerful than we think. Thinking of this, Yuzao couldn't help but be more vigilant. Gilu. Just as Yuzao finished speaking, the head of Hero suddenly twisted in an extremely uncoordinated way to the side facing Crossing Shine and Manuscript 03, and opened the two giant eyeballs with dark yellow pus attached. This scene immediately triggered Yuzao and Beiyang's memories of the battle not long ago, because this pair of disgusting eyeballs is exactly the same as the monster they just killed. Only then did Yuzao know what a truly horrifying horror was. It doesn't need to look disgusting, nor does it need to make twisted roars. The kind of horror that can penetrate into the bones is enough to violate the coordination in human cognition. Just like what Hero is doing now, the body is running fast towards the front, but the head turns 90 degrees, fixed motionlessly in the direction of Crossing Shine and Manuscript 03. The two sides are now running on two parallel paths, but the monster is at a high place, while Yuzao and Beiyang are at a low place. Since it is not a hero, it means that Sato Zion and Aozi are still alive, right? Beiyang gradually regained his sanity and his emotions were no longer so excited. Of course, but this also means that it has successfully lured us. Although Yuzao knew that he and Beiyang had fallen into the other party's trap, he felt better when he thought that the probability of Sato Zion and Aozi being alive was still high. Then let it pay the price. Beiyang raised his voice while controlling Manuscript 03 to unfold the X-Wing armor behind it. However, at this time, Hero had already taken the lead and turned the 4 heavy artillery in his abdomen towards the direction of the two people. This was impossible for the hero to do. Be careful. Boom boom boom. 4 swollen meatballs flew out of the monster's heavy artillery and exploded before they landed. Green flames rose on the cracked ground, and the rapidly expanding smoke and dust instantly engulfed Crossing Shine's huge body. Crossing Shine. Beiyang, who was running in front of the team, immediately stopped and turned to run towards the position where Crossing Shine was attacked. But Manuscript 03 had just taken a step, and Hero jumped down from the towering cliff and pounced on Beiyang at a faster speed than before. Beiyang, who had no time to react, could only control the Mecha to cross the two high-frequency hot swords in front of him, so as to withstand the heavy punch of Hero. What a powerful force. After sliding back nearly 100 meters, Beiyang barely stabilized his center of gravity and reposed in a fighting posture. Hero did not rush to pursue, but instead raised his right fist curiously in front of his eyes, looking at the billowing white smoke from the 5 broken fingers. No matter how similar its action mode is to that of a Mecha, it cannot change the fact that it is a flesh and blood body. The heavy punch just now hit the high-frequency hot sword of Manuscript 03 directly, not only causing the chitin shell wrapped around the outside of its fist to break on the spot, but also directly melting its 5 fingers. Puff. The next second, Beiyang saw that Hero grew 5 new fingers at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the entire palm was also wrapped in a new chitin shell. This regeneration speed. The damage caused by the missile will definitely be repaired soon. Beiyang, who originally wanted to try to use long-range attacks, immediately gave up the idea of wasting ammunition. She now realized how dangerous the trap mentioned by Crossing Cheyenne was. In terms of long-range attacks, Hero's previous artillery attack even calculated the advance amount, and the shells fired were automatically detonated after approaching Crossing Cheyenne. The amazing energy contained in the explosion is even enough to destroy a small defensive fortress. In terms of close combat, Hero can also knock Manuscript 03 back 100 meters with one punch, and the vibration generated by the body makes Shiro feel numb all over. This is the true strength of Hero. Just when Shiro was in a dilemma, Hero 100 meters away suddenly raised his head and opened his bloody mouth that was big enough to split the back of his head. Then, Hero put his hand into his mouth and slowly pulled out a white bone as sharp as a knife. Shiro recognized its shape at a glance. It was the sword of the Ghost King, Tuiski. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116 Behavior Replication. Baying. I need 5 minutes to repair myself. After the smoke and dust cleared, Crossing Cheyenne, who was kneeling on one knee in the deep pit, was covered with scars. His outer armor was almost completely melted, and his black body was covered with concave holes one after another. 5 minutes was already Yuzao's limit. This was the shortest time he could use all the energy in his body to regenerate cells. Warning, full body armor has been damaged. He never thought that the meatballs vomited by the monster would have such a terrifying power. Based on the explosive residues detected by the system on Crossing Cheyenne, Yuzao could basically conclude that those meatballs were made by the monster using the unstable blood in its body. The reason why humans dare not use energy weapons of mass destruction to deal with monsters is to prevent the monster's blood from becoming a catalyst in the energy reaction, thereby giving rise to a disaster of killing 800 enemies and injuring 1,000 of themselves. But now the monsters are actually using their own blood in turn, which is undoubtedly a devastating blow to the Watcher Alliance. Fortunately, the monster did not launch a second round of bombardment. Although Yuzao did not know the reason, he considered it as the monster needing to cool down. The black flesh and blood grew out from the skeleton in the deepest part of Crossing Cheyenne's body, filling the broken body at a speed visible to the naked eye. Crossing Cheyenne did not turn into dust in this round of attack. Firstly because the strength of the body was unprecedentedly improved after the skeleton evolution, and secondly, thanks to his other equipment module, Lava Heart, which was specially used to stabilize this violent reaction. Although the stabilization effect cannot reduce the energy level generated by the reaction itself, after turning this energy into controllable, Crossing Cheyenne still suffered more than 50% less damage. The 3 green beads in his hand are the best proof. This is the product formed after he made the energy controllable. In a sense, it can also be regarded as a stable form of monster blood without losing its activity. 5 minutes. I know. Beiying's ears oozed a few drops of cold sweat. At this moment, Hero has pulled the entire bone-made sword out of his throat and assumed a standard posture to meet the enemy. Also, don't blame yourself. Even if you didn't rush out at that time, I would have caught up with the monster in a few seconds. Yuzao knew that Beiying felt guilty. We can't bet on the lives of Colonel Sato and Aozi. If we step into the trap, we can only blame the fact that we have too little information. Not your fault. What Yuzao said was the truth. Even now, the two of them could not confirm the personal safety and whereabouts of Sato Zion and Aozi. Even if the monster was playing tricks on them, they could only jump into the pit. I will protect you. After a few seconds of silence, Beiying gave such a response. The next second, the armor of Manuscript 03 was fully deployed, switching to the most powerful and power-consuming assault mode. The white mecha rushed out from the spot like an arrow from a string, and rushed towards Hero who had just raised his toes at a speed that tore through the air. Puff. 2 orange-red sword lights flashed in the air, directly cutting 2 deep scars 10 meters long on the right arm of Hero. However, such a serious injury did not affect the actions of Hero at all. It immediately changed its stance and aimed its sword at Manuscript 03 who wanted to attack from behind. The green blood of the beast splashed on the burning blade in Beiyang's hand, emitting a pungent smell of burning. TSK. Manuscript 03, who was blocked by the attack, quickly pulled away under Beiyang's control and avoided the downward blade of Hero. Looking at the dozens of meters long knife marks on the ground, Beiyang couldn't help but sweat for himself. The brief fight just now gave Beiyang at least 3 valuable intelligence. The first one is that ordinary attacks can't have any effect on the actions of Hero. Even with serious injuries, the opponent can still exert 100% of his strength. In other words, unless Shirokage could directly cut off the opponent's limbs, the scene would become what she was witnessing now. Hero's wound had healed 30%. Second, the toughness of the slashing knife pulled out of Hero's body was far beyond Shirokage's expectations. Even the high-frequency heat-cutting sword with high-frequency vibration and high-temperature heat energy could not cut it off. Although the double swords in Manuscript 03's hands cannot be said to be completely ineffective, at best they can only leave a few inconspicuous gaps on the opponent's bone-slashing knife. Third, Shirokage has not been able to gain any advantage so far. In terms of strength, the opponent's attack will definitely cause heavy damage, as long as it touches his body. In terms of speed, after Shirokage launched the first unexpected attack and succeeded, Hero's actions immediately kept up with Manuscript 03's pace and blocked a second attack. If he cannot quickly establish an advantage and kill the opponent, then Shirokage will only be the one being crushed in the next battle. Just when Beiyang retreated to a distance of 100 meters, Hero appeared from the smoke that had not yet dispersed and swung a horizontal slash at the waist of Manuscript 03. Bang! At the critical moment, the full joint jet ports located on the waist and legs of the Mecha suddenly burst into bright flames, and with a powerful reaction force, Manuscript 03 was forcibly pushed out of the attack range of the slashing sword. Opportunity. Beiyang took advantage of the situation to control the right arm of Manuscript 03 to hold the hilt tightly, and after the body stabilized the center of gravity, he swung the sword directly at the head of Hero. At this time, Hero was still in the posture of holding the sword with both hands and slashing horizontally. Even if it was fast, it would not have time to raise its hand to block the attack of Manuscript 03 with a slashing sword. The burning hot sword pierced the restless air, and with an unstoppable trend, it passed over the solid and powerful arms of Hero, and went straight to its head. However, just when Beiyang was about to succeed, she saw from the corner of her eye that the 4 gun muzzles on the opponent's abdomen began to vibrate. Boom, boom, boom. Viscous liquid spurted out from the heavy artillery, made of flesh and blood, and the powerful reaction force instantly pushed the body of Hero back 50 meters. It used the same method as Beiyang to avoid the seemingly unavoidable attack. Oops. Beiyang, who realized the crisis, immediately controlled the X-wing armor behind Manuscript 03 to aim at the ground. Almost at the moment when Hero relaunched the attack, more than 20 missiles that split in the air bombed along the shortest straight line between the two sides. In an instant, the smoke and rubble raised by the explosion swept across the entire valley. In Beiyang's sight, everything was obscured by the wind and sand. This is the effect she wanted. With the precise positioning of the holographic terrain map and the energy radar, Beiyang immediately controlled Manuscript 03 to start moving. She was waiting for an opportunity to defeat the enemy with one blow. Chapter 117 The Devil in the Smoke. Hero rushed to the last place where Manuscript 03 was in its sight without hesitation. The sharp bone chopper drew a crescent moon in the air, instantly blowing away the smoke and dust around Hero, clearing a circular visible area centered on it. But Manuscript 03 was not there at all. As the smoke and dust in the sky slowly gathered around Hero again, the powerful giant also took back the chopper in his hand. Its 2 dark yellow eyeballs kept scanning the gray smoke, making an uncomfortable gurgling sound. At this time, on the other side of the smoke, Beiyang was already holding 2 high-frequency hot swords and standing 100 meters behind Hero. Since the missile was launched from the X-wing armor of Manuscript 03, she closed all the mobile jets and tried to maintain the moving speed of the body at 70% of the maximum speed. Only by doing so, she would not completely disperse the smoke and dust covering the Mecha, so as to achieve the purpose of hiding her whereabouts. according to its previous performance and reaction speed. If we rashly launch an attack from this distance, it will definitely be noticed by it. Beiying seized every second to analyze the current battle situation. 100 meters is the maximum distance she currently assumes. According to the previous collisions between her and Hero, this 100 meters is exactly the maximum distance that Manuscript 03 can react to when the opponent launches an attack. After all, Beiying cannot guarantee whether Hero will also have a way to lock herself in the smoke and dust. If the opponent's current behavior is just a trick, then Beiying's sneak attack is tantamount to suicide. Another hidden danger is that since Beiying can react to Hero's attack at this distance, then Hero, who is faster than Manuscript 03, will definitely be able to react to her attack. Not to mention that Beiying must charge at maximum power when launching a surprise attack. Once Beiying launches an attack, her current position will be directly exposed. I can only take a gamble. Tens of seconds later, the rolling smoke and dust once again spread to the feet of Hero, and the two dark yellow eyeballs on its head stopped turning at the moment when its vision was blocked and the pupils were fixed in front of itself. At this time, Hero stood there motionless like a dark red stone statue, but its entire body surface grew fine short hair. As long as there is any change in airflow, the short hair on Hero will transmit the movement to the brain, making it more alert to a specific direction. In this way, if Beiying launches an attack, Hero can know the direction of the attack at the first time and can respond in the shortest time. Even if Beiying drags on like this and waits for visibility to gradually improve, Hero can still lock the position of Manuscript 03. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At the moment, when Hero heard the sound, the short hair covering its body also sensed the chaotic airflow at the same time. The next second, 3 missiles with blue tail flames emerged from its left side and burst into groups of scorching flames on its body. For Hero, this wound was nothing more than a tickle, and it immediately raised its knife and prepared to kill in the direction of the missile. But just as Hero had just completed the turn, 3 more missiles suddenly hit its back, blowing its chitinous shell into pieces. Raw. Under the attack of missiles flying from all directions, Hero was completely enraged. It opened its bloody mouth again and let out an angry roar. Its dark yellow eyeballs turned around aimlessly like a convulsion, but no matter whether it could predict the direction of the next missile, the knife in its hand could not be faster than the missiles shuttling through the smoke and dust. Finally, amid the frantic roar of Hero, it welcomed the first large-scale missile attack. These explosives in the smoke and dust flew towards Hero from all directions, heading straight for its body that had not yet fully healed. Boom. Countless blue flames rose in the air with the flying smoke and dust, and the deafening roar, and the endless explosions intertwined, resounding and echoing throughout the valley. A white figure suddenly broke through the smoke at this time, waving the 2 high-frequency hot swords in his hands at lightning speed. As 2 elegant orange-red arcs flashed in the air, the roar of Hero stopped abruptly. The smoke and gravel in the sky were all swept to the same direction by the sudden sword wind, clearing the area where the 2 giants were. Before the green beast blood had time to drip from the sword of Manuscript 03, it was vaporized by the high temperature into wisps of white smoke and dissipated in the air. Beiying controlled Manuscript 03 to straighten up and turned to look at the Hero standing there. Puff. Broken pieces of flesh and blood gushed out from the neck and waist of Hero, and then, this behemoth was broken into 3 pieces in front of Beiying's eyes. They were the head, the upper body, and the lower limbs. She got what she wanted, and cut off the body of Hero with the most violent means. The blood that spread like a tide soaked the dusty soles of Manuscript 03, but Beiying did not stop there. Instead, she controlled Manuscript 03 to swing the 2 swords in her hands again. The hot and sharp sword slashed through the Hero, who collapsed on the ground again and again. In just 30 seconds, Beiying cut this motionless body into dozens of pieces of different sizes. But Beiying's cutting was not over. She kept repeating the action of swinging the sword until she was sure that the 2 high-frequency hot swords in her hands had slashed every corner of this body. The flashing red light disappeared from the radars of Manuscript 03 and Xingqian. At this moment, Beiying finally understood what Xingqian did at that time. Facing an enemy with such a strong regenerative ability, it would be impossible to rest assured if he didn't chop it into meat paste. Are you venting your anger? The smoke had long dissipated, and Xingchen waited until Beiyang stopped completely before finding a chance to speak. No, I just want to make sure it's really dead. Beiyang had just finished this sentence when he stretched out the foot of manuscript 03 and stepped hard on the few intact pieces of meat. At this moment, it was just like that moment. However, as the initiator of the whipping corpse behavior, Yu Zhao naturally would not stop Beiyang's current behavior. 3 minutes, faster than I thought. You still want me to fight this guy for 5 minutes? It was not until then that Beiyang realized that his whole body was completely soaked in sweat. No, I just didn't think you could kill it. Yu Zhao really just wanted Beiyang to hold on for 5 minutes. He was even ready to take the risk of eating the beast blood balls to accelerate regeneration if Beiyang couldn't hold on. After hearing Yu Zhao's words, Beiyang was not angry, but smiled and said, "Don't underestimate me. You are not the only one who has made progress." Chapter 118 Abnormal Fluctuation. You look quite special now. After waiting for 2 minutes, Crossing Cheyenne had completed his self-repair, but because Crossing Cheyenne's external armor had been completely scrapped, the person standing in front of Beiyang at this moment was almost a dark muscle giant. What's special about it? Yu Zhao didn't quite understand what Beiyang meant. It just doesn't look like a mecha. Beiyang found a sentence that she thought was more appropriate to express her meaning euphemistically. After the last upgrade, I'm no longer a mecha. You can think of the external armor and equipment modules as clothes draped over my body. I'm now a real living being. Yu Zhao thought about it and decided to tell Beiyang the truth. After all, even if the girl in front of him didn't understand the meaning of these words, she wouldn't be as impatient as Yuan Zhen to take him for dissection. Then you are not wearing clothes now. Although Crossing Cheyenne has exceeded the scope of the human species, Beiyang inexplicably wanted to look away from Crossing Cheyenne when she thought of the male anthropomorphic form of Crossing Cheyenne that she had seen before. We are not of the same species, so don't worry about these details. Having said that, Yu Zhao was not very satisfied with his current appearance. In general, as Beiyang described, Crossing Cheyenne was like a strong man with solid muscles all over his body. If it weren't for the dark skin with a metallic luster wrapped around his body, I'm afraid this scene could have been regarded as a giant playing rogue. However, the more Crossing Cheyenne said this, the more Beiyang cared about Crossing Cheyenne's appearance. Even though she kept repeating in her heart, "Look away," she still stared at every detail of Crossing Cheyenne's body with wide eyes. Judging by human standards, Crossing Cheyenne is an absolute bodybuilder. At present, the only part of Crossing Cheyenne's body that is still covered by armor is his head, but even Yu Zhao himself doesn't know what kind of face this new body has, at least in his heart. It is absolutely impossible to have normal facial features like humans. I should consider changing to a set of self-repairing armor. After noticing Beiyang's somewhat scorching gaze, Yu Zhao silently made a note of his new needs in his heart. But it was not a good idea for him to stay naked all the time, so Yu Zhao quickly mobilized the energy in his body to accelerate the growth of the black armor of the equipment module. In less than a minute, a layer of black substance covered the surface of Crossing Cheyenne's body and showed an angular shape. This was Crossing Cheyenne deliberately letting the black armor grow into the appearance of artificial armor, but it must be very different from the real armor in terms of defense. Sure enough, after Crossing Cheyenne finished dressing, Beiyang's slightly red cheeks finally turned to one side. Let's go back to the Wuju Mountain Air Raid shelter first and confirm the situation of Colonel Sato and Alzi. Yu Zhao shrugged and squeezed his hands while speaking, adapting to the light new armor. Okay, it happens that I have something to tell you. Beiyang also quickly adjusted his state and got his thoughts back on track. The two giants soon embarked on their journey and headed towards their destination at the maximum speed of normal power. What do you want to say? After being forced to remove a heavy armor, Crossing Cheyenne's movement speed has increased significantly. It's about the monster just now. Beiyang sorted out the various information in his mind. After I cut it into 3 pieces, I could feel that its energy level had a very large drop. I also encountered this situation when we fought the first monster. Hearing Beiyang's words, Yuzao also recalled the twisted monster he killed when he turned on the overload mode, but at that time I thought it was a normal energy drop when the monster died, so I didn't pay much attention to it. The energy drop speed of a normal monster can't be that fast. Remember what I told you at that time, its cell activity disappeared very quickly. If it was a normal monster, it would take at least 6 hours to deactivate. Beiyang's expression also became serious. Of course what you said makes sense, but don't forget where we are now, and what kind of enemies we are fighting against. Yuzao kindly reminded Beiyang that, since they set foot on the fourth line of death and silence, the situation they faced was much more dangerous than before. The land turned into scorched earth, the monsters with energy mutations, and the mysteries that followed one after another. If Beiyang still used the old standards to analyze the enemies they had defeated so far, it would undoubtedly be a failure. In this land full of dangers, abnormal is the only normal. I won't say anything without evidence. Just when Yuzao thought Beiyang would give up the discussion, the other party sent him a data packet. This is. Yuzao opened the data packet with the system and found that it recorded the energy fluctuation log of Beiyang before and after killing Hero. It was because this happened when we killed the first monster that I kept the record open during the battle. Beiyang had prepared his words long ago, as you can see now. The moment I succeeded in attacking, the monster's energy level began to drop drastically. I don't believe that its life cells can't even survive for a second. Yuzao did not reply to Beiyang's explanation immediately, but carefully reviewed the data fluctuations in the record over and over again. This kind of situation that violates biological instincts was the first time Yuzao encountered it, and it also aroused another doubt in his mind. With the regenerative ability shown by the two monsters, it is entirely possible for them to repair such injuries. This is also the reason why Yuzao and Beiyang finished off the monsters. But strangely, the two monsters did not show any repair behavior after being cut in half, but fell into a pool of blood on the spot, completely unable to move. Have you figured out anything? Seeing that Yuzao had remained silent, Beiyang couldn't help but ask. Don't you think we won a little too easily? Yuzao sorted out his thoughts bit by bit, and he felt that he was about to uncover the mystery. If you compare it with the battle we experienced in Blackhorn City, then I admit that it was indeed easier. Beiyang didn't seem to expect Yuzao to say this, but now you are also much stronger than before. As you said yourself, since the last upgrade, you have exceeded the scope of the Mecha. Have you taken this into account? I have. Beiyang, who was about to refute the other party, immediately frowned. The strength of these two monsters is higher than you think. I can feel it, but they didn't exert their 100% strength and died under our full force attack. Chapter 119, Ghost in the Shell. Hearing this, Beiyang couldn't help but break into a cold sweat. If what Yuzao said was true, then the attack she had made on Hero before would not have been able to bring him down. If he had exerted 100% of his strength, Beiyang and Manuscript 03 would have been torn into pieces. If someone else had said something, like I can feel it, Beiyang would never have believed it, but when Crossing Cheyenne said it, she had to take it seriously. Then why did they give up resistance? Beiyang thought about it, but couldn't find a reason for the two monsters to do so. That's what I'm thinking about, too. Crossing Cheyenne mechanically repeated the action of running, his body acting completely on instinct. Next, I'll explain my views and assumptions, and interrupt me if you have any doubts. Assumptions are a kind of doubt. Beiyang said this silently in her mind. After all, she could still tell the difference between discussion and argument. First of all, let's assume that the rapid disappearance of the monster cell activity is its characteristic, and only discuss why the two monsters were killed by us. The first possibility is that the attacks suffered by the two monsters before they died happened to hit their weak parts, just like humans being hit in the brain or heart, so they died instantly. I have a question. Although Beiyang wanted Yuzao to continue talking, the first point just put forward was already unreasonable in her eyes. It's okay, just ask if you have any questions. Yuzao wished that Beiyang would interrupt him a few more times. Just talking about the first monster we defeated, its form was unconventional. Not only was there traces of various creatures all over its body, it didn't even have a head. We didn't find a heart in its rib-like chest, nor did we find a brain in its tentacles. Is it really a coincidence that its weakness is in the thin layer of flesh on its waist? That makes sense, but it is indeed very unlikely. Yuzao did not deny Beiyang's rebuttal. Then did you find the weakness of the second monster? You killed it all by yourself. To be honest, no. Beiyang said his thoughts very frankly. It is because it looks like a hero that I started from its neck and waist. For a mecha, losing its head and being cut in half are both fatal injuries, and there is no way to save it, except for you. Before Yuzao could speak, Beiyang took the lead in adding the exception of Crossing Shine, who did not put the cockpit on his head. However, after Crossing Shine became a living being, Beiyang could not be sure whether Crossing Shine could continue to fight as a headless knight. Your point of view is very convincing, so we will classify the first possibility as a coincidence. We do not rule out the possibility that it is true, but the probability is extremely low. Yuzao gave more rigorous conclusion, but to Beiyang, it was no different from ruling out this option. The second possibility is that the monster's self-repair ability has its limits, and the 2 fatal attacks we launched exceeded a certain critical value, so the monster fell in front of us. This possibility sounds more reliable, but there are still doubts. This time Beiyang did not refute it immediately, but thought for a while before speaking. Tell me your opinion. You yourself have said before that these 2 monsters did not exert their 100% strength in your eyes, so is self-repair also within the range of strength you recognize? Take the first monster as an example. At that time, you thought its self-repair was to lure you. When you launched the attack, I noticed that its repair speed instantly increased several times, not to mention that it directly regenerated a tentacle in front of us. There is a difference between repairing a tentacle and repairing the entire upper body. Yuzao interjected. But it doesn't need to repair the entire upper body. It only needs to regenerate the connection between the lower limbs and the upper body before the body falls off, just like suturing. Beiyang's reply made Yuzao fall into silence. He had indeed overlooked this point. If the monster could grow another tentacle, how could it not regenerate flesh and blood for suturing? Thinking of this, he realized that his previous attack direction was also wrong. If the monster really had a limit to self-repair, then he and Beiyang should pursue a killing move with a larger killing area. In Yuzao's own words, he should use moves such as 17 knives in 3 seconds or a whirlwind meat grinder in overload mode to expand the wound area on the monster to a point where it could not be repaired at all. But the fact is that both monsters fell in front of what Crossing Shine and Manuscript 03 thought was a fatal attack. Originally, I only thought of these 2 possibilities, but the point you put forward gave me another idea. After a long silence, Yuzao finally spoke slowly. Not far away, the tall and towering Wuju mountain also appeared in the sight of Yuzao and Beiyang. They didn't use their full strength, not because they were letting us go, but because they didn't know how to use it. Only by fighting us continuously can they gradually use it. You mean, they are learning while fighting? Beiyang showed an incredible expression on his face. Yes, it's better to say that they didn't develop all their potential than to say that they didn't use their full strength. This assumption was deduced by Yuzao after he saw the second monster. He had never seen a monster that grew into a mecha and fought according to the mecha's action mode. Beiyang had a deeper understanding of Yuzao's idea. Hero actually replicated the operation of Manuscript 03 using reaction force to pull away on the spot. According to your idea, is their self-repair also obtained by imitating you? Beiyang clearly remembered that Crossing Shine was attacked a lot during the chase with the first monster, but Crossing Shine used self-repair to complete his self-healing. In this way, it can explain why monsters don't use sutures to repair themselves. They have never seen Crossing Shine show such a degree of repair ability. Your idea is not unreasonable, but I don't think it is possible, and I didn't grow a head or an arm in front of them, but the first monster has learned to regenerate its tentacles. Yuzao said his thoughts in person. Do you already have an answer? Beiyang had guessed that Yuzao would have something to say later. Yes, but you may not believe it. Yuzao's tone became unusually serious. They are not real monsters at all, or these 2 bodies are just empty shells. The moment R/ hit, the consciousness that controlled them abandoned the body, which can also explain why the second monster is so familiar with our action pattern. In the cockpit of Manuscript 03, Beiying's body was shaking slightly. So we have been fighting the same enemy. Chapter 120 Left Fork. This is the third time that Sato and Aozi have stood at the fork in the road. Before this, the two had listened to Kobayashi's story and moved all the medicines on the Hyoji into the closed area, leaving only two people's medical emergency supplies. The good news is that, while Sato and Aozi were returning to Hyoji to move supplies, they had already contacted Xingshan and the others. The two sides quickly exchanged information, and Xingshan and Beiying urged Sato to find Naomico's whereabouts as soon as possible. So they are standing here not to return to the cockpit of Hyoji, but to unveil the last layer of the mystery of Okioka County. Are you ready, Daozi? Feeling the cool breeze blowing from the left fork in the road, Sato once again checked the number of spare bullets on his body, counting the one that has been inserted into the heavy pistol, a total of 7 magazines. Daozi's equipment is no worse than Sato's. In addition to the standard iron pilot pistol, Daozi also brought the SP Smart pistol with him. After getting Daozi's affirmative answer, Sato and Aozi once again formed a formation of one in front and one behind, heading deep into the fork in the road. Compared to the right passage that the two had walked through for the first time, the road on the left seemed very normal. Sato did not find any bloodstains or hear any strange sounds. The dazzling light passed through the thick glass cover outside the flashlight, and under Sato's control, it kept swinging in the spacious and dark tunnel. Countless dust suspended in the air was exposed to the light, forming a significant contrast with the motionless stone brick walls. From here, you can see footprints. The peaceful journey lasted only 100 meters, and an explosion-proof door similar to the entrance to the closed area was placed in front of Sato and Aozi. As long as you look closely, you can find that the explosion-proof door here is obviously more advanced in material and thickness than the next door. But this explosion-proof door is completely open, which means that the last group of people who passed through here either had no safety awareness or deliberately left the door open. Unfortunately, this group of people never came back from behind the door. Sato Xiang first used a flashlight to illuminate the area behind the gate. After confirming that there was no abnormality nearby, he called Daozi to walk to the front of the gate with him. Electronic authentication? Just as the two were about to pass through the gate, Sato Xiang suddenly noticed that there was a biometric authenticator installed on the explosion-proof wall next to the gate. Frowning, Sato Xiang quickly cast his eyes on the explosion-proof door. He then discovered that the explosion-proof door only had a wheel on the inside that could be manually opened. An idea immediately popped up in his mind. This door was not opened by Naomiko and her group at all. Before they came here, the door was already open. Otherwise, in the case of power outage, the explosion-proof door would not be able to be opened from the outside. Moreover, judging from the dust accumulation in the area behind the door, this place has been abandoned. The power supply interruption must have happened a long time ago. Be careful. Sato Xiang warned Daozi while reinstalling the light source under the pistol. Sure enough, after the two stepped through the gate, a strange sense of desolation came towards them. There must have been a landslide here. Looking at the rubble and dust on the ground, as well as the cracks on the surrounding rock walls, Sato came to the conclusion immediately. The two carefully moved forward between the ruins and the collapsed boulders. Due to the high content of particulate matter in the air, Sato and Aozi had to wear filter masks. Finally, after bypassing many obstacles, the two came to a huge circular elevator shaft. Even if he only saw the complicated supporting devices around, Sato could guess that this place must have been reinforced during construction. Otherwise they would not have been able to find such an open area in the mess. Just as Sato picked up a stone to measure the depth of the elevator shaft, a flashing red dot suddenly flashed across his sight. Sato, who was sure that he was not hallucinating, immediately looked in the direction where the red dot appeared. After 3 seconds, a faint red light appeared in his field of vision again. With a skeptical attitude, Sato threw away the small stone in his hand and walked cautiously to the place where the red light was flashing. After wiping the dust off the screen with his arm, a low-power smart terminal appeared in front of the two. The power supply system of the lifting platform is independent, which is not unusual. Satoru quickly found the interface for controlling the lifting platform according to the operating instructions on the terminal. Current lifting platform location, B2. Due to emergency protocol restrictions, the lifting platform can only move between A1, A2, A3, B1, B2. Your current location, A1, B2. That means the area where Naomiko and her group last stayed is in B2. Although Satoru has been able to determine the area where the target is located, he does not intend to go straight to B2. If Naomiko and her group are trapped there, it can only mean that there is definitely some danger in the B2 area. Bean, look for signs around here. While Satoru gave Daozi an order, he kept tapping on the smart terminal with his fingers. Not this, and not this. Satoru opened blue windows one by one, but after less than a second of browsing, they were swiped away by Satoru's fingers. Finally, after flipping through more than 30 sub-pages, Satoru completely retrieved all the contents in the terminal. He did not find any instructions for each floor, but he got an extremely concise electronic map. The reason why this map is concise is that the map only marks the letter and number codes of each area, and each place is distinguished by different colors. But no matter the code or color, there are no corresponding notes and instructions on the map. This confidentiality is really professional. Satoru glanced at the Gemini medical logo in the upper right corner of the terminal with a bad temper, and silently shared the map data with Daozi. A minute later, Daozi also shook his head at Satoru in disappointment, indicating that he did not find any signboards or anything like that. In desperation, Satoru could only open the map data he had just obtained, and bite the bullet and quickly analyze the meaning of the code and color. The entire underground project is divided into 4 areas from A to D. Areas C and D cannot be reached via the lift platform, and can only be reached via the artificial passage of B3. The areas after B2 are all marked in red and black, and some rooms in B1 and B2 are also marked in this color, but in the areas from A1 to A3, there are only blue and green. All colors have different shades, and dark colors should represent a deeper degree. After some thought, Satoru decided to go to area A3 with Daozi first. There are both green and blue rooms there, and they can go to area B via artificial passages or lift platforms. Although he didn't quite understand what the green and blue colors meant, his intuition told him that there must be a reason why the lift platform was locked between A1 and B2. Red and black must represent danger. Chapter 121 Military Technology. The lifting platform has been activated. If you are in danger, please press the red button on the wall. After hearing the system's prompt, Satoru immediately moved his sight to the conspicuous red button. At this moment, the two were standing on a huge circular platform with a radius of 10 meters. The entire platform was made of military-grade alloys. This reliable metal was also the only choice for major mobile armor corps when building bases. It's really eye-opening that a medical group can build a military project of this level. Satoru couldn't help but speak out. After all, the facilities he and Daozi were using now were visibly different from the old and backward facilities in the closed area next door, but the two were in the same mountain. The giant platform painted gray slowly descended, and the stability it showed during operation even made Satoru doubt that he was standing on the still ground. Not only that, the low noise generated by a platform of this size during operation was almost negligible, thanks to the magnetic levitation traction technology used in the lifting channel. The platform has arrived at area A3. As the lifting platform slowly slowed down, Satoru and Daozi also saw the scene of area A3 in advance through the explosion-proof glass. As if there was a solid sticky darkness hiding the entire area in the shadows, the dark red emergency response lights emitted an ambiguous light under the metal floor and the base of the wall, which could easily make people associate them with protruding blood vessels and veins. Even though the A3 area did not seem to have suffered much damage in the landslide, in the absence of power, this place still revealed a strange sense of danger and desolation. I hope this map is not outdated. Satoru took a deep breath and led Daozi out of the lift platform and officially stepped into the territory of A3. Compared with the air raid shelter tunnel upstairs, the space here does not look much larger, but judging from the ventilation holes every 5 meters on both sides of the arched passage, at least the air quality in the A3 area is better than that of the upper floors. None of these doors are open electronic locks, all electronic locks. Sato Zion pulled the yellow metal door handle with all his strength, but the tightly closed alloy door did not move at all. Looking around, all the doors in the corridor were closed. If there were no exceptions, these doors would never be opened manually from the outside when the power was off. Just when Sato was worried about the electronic lock, Dowsey suddenly put away his gun and walked to the door, motioning Sato to step back. "Dowsey, are you going to?" Before Sato finished speaking, Dowsey put her two petite hands on the door handle and pulled the door hard. Creak. At the same time, the friction sound of the machine rang in Sato's ears. At this time, Dowsey was closing her eyes tightly. Her two small hands were all clenched white due to the force, and her whole body was leaning back, like a tight compound bow. "Come on, Dowsey." Sato couldn't help but clench his fists and cheer Dowsey on. Bang. Finally, with a crisp sound echoing in the empty corridor, the two ended their first violent door-breaking operation. Sato Yu rushed forward and hugged Dowsey, who almost fell. The door handle was broken. Dowsey wiped the sweat from her forehead unwillingly and kept shaking her wrist that was about to burn while staring at the door without the door handle with hostility. However, Dowsey's efforts were not meaningless because she not only broke the door handle but also pulled off a piece of the base plate under the door handle. Sato Yu walked back to the door, reached out and removed the door lock chip exposed in front of him and put it into the slot on the wrist of the combat uniform. An unknown external connection device was detected, and the system is identifying chip model, Heike 9, manufacturer, Redden's Military Technology Group. Redden's. Many bad memories emerged in Sato Yu's mind. Redden's Military Technology Group is an industrial manufacturing giant with a century-old history. Before the fourth scientific and technological revolution, it was already the largest defense contractor in Heian. Its business areas include large ground military vehicles, aerospace, strategic military weapons and other fields. It is one of the most controversial companies in the international field. When the fourth scientific and technological revolution came, Redden's Military Technology Group became one of the biggest beneficiaries and leaders of the first batch of scientific and technological revolutions with its profound heritage and insightful vision. It has also developed four major fields: military artificial intelligence, precision chip design and manufacturing, brain-computer interface development, and powered exoskeleton, becoming one of the few oligarchs that master the entire war industry chain. Sato Yu clearly remembers that the nuclear bomb that fell on Zori country many years ago to fight monsters was Redden's cutting-edge product. Ironically, Redden's Military Technology Group even used this opportunity to promote its products to the world, saying that the nuclear bombs they produce are the least harmful to the human body and the environment. However, it was such a company that injected the first huge amount of money into the Watcher Alliance at the beginning of the war between humans and monsters, helped the Alliance to establish the Omega Complex and War Factory, and participated in the incubation of many original projects. It can be said that without the strong support of Redden's, the first mobile armor of mankind might have to be delayed for at least 2 years before it could be launched. A barbaric, conscienceless, profit-seeking and unconscious company. Perhaps people in the future will sooner or later eliminate such a company, but now we have no choice but to use it. This is the evaluation of Redden's military technology by the Alliance Council. It's really a tiger skin. Sato Yu used the idiom he learned when he was studying in Kyango, but now he had to be glad that this chip was made by Redden's. As a deep cooperation partner of the Watcher Alliance, Redden's developed a program for the Alliance that can be used to unlock the firewalls of all Redden's products. The cracking program has been started, calling the program Redden's Authorization Key. Data cracking is successful. The corresponding permissions have been unlocked. Sato Yu and Dowsey instantly gained the right to freely enter and exit all rooms in the A3 area. However, the two of them were still missing the most critical step: energizing the electronic locks in all the rooms. Query circuit information. Search for keywords. Power control room. Request received. System processing. Reverse circuit query successful. Target location marked on the map. The nearest navigation route has been shown to you. A blue holographic image instantly rose from under Sato Yu's feet, wrapping him and Owzy in a maze-like area structure. A striking white path has already indicated the next path for the two of them, as well as their destination. It was a room that appeared dark blue on the map. Chapter 122 No passage. The sound of wind, footsteps, breathing, and heartbeat. In the 5-minute journey, only these 4 sounds were heard by Sato Yui. They formed a tacit cooperation with the dark red emergency lights and cleverly integrated into the deep and dark corridor. Every time he passed a room, Sato Yui would subconsciously glance at the wall next to the door with his peripheral vision. To be precise, he was not looking at the wall, but the glass on the wall, that was already pitch black. Since the construction of the A3 area was entirely undertaken by the Reden's military technology group, the structure and layout here seemed very familiar to Sato Yui. After all, the base of the United Front Corps was also built with the help of this company. Such a room is standard for every member in the United Front base, and the black glass on the wall should have been transparent and visible. Only the main control room and the owner of the room are qualified to decide whether to make the glass two-way, one-way, or completely invisible. Did the people in Gemini Medical not evacuate in an emergency, but evacuate in an orderly manner? Looking at the doors that were uniformly closed, Sato Yui's eyes gradually became sharp. The reason why Sato Yui thought so was very simple. From the places he and Owzy had walked along, everything here seemed a little too clean and tidy. The two did not find any garbage or signs of human damage in the corridor. If it was an emergency evacuation, it would inevitably cause varying degrees of damage to various facilities. What's more, all the rooms were neatly closed, which made Sato Yui wonder if the landing was just an excuse made by Gemini Medical. You have arrived at the target location. Navigation ends. As the system prompt sounded, the two finally came to the power control room at the end of the corridor. The only door that can still operate normally is locked, which is really ironic. In front of the two was a 3-meter wide double door, with a vertical bite-type black reinforcement sticking between the closed door gaps. The circular rotating lock that should have controlled the door switch was now firmly imprisoned by the reinforcement, leaving only a digital device interface and a projection device exposed to the air. A red holographic window half a meter high blocked Sato and Owzy. The most conspicuous thing was the word no passage that kept switching between multiple languages. Due to the restrictions of the emergency agreement, the power control room has been blocked, and only those with the highest authority are allowed to access. Sato read out a line of small words in the holographic window. As soon as the voice fell, Sato pulled out a data cable from the wrist of his combat uniform and plugged it into the only digital device interface. Interface identification. Reden's authorization key has been presented. Authorization successful. Restrictions lifted. Click. The black bite type reinforcement suddenly made a series of sawtooth disconnection sounds, and then they retracted into the wall base located at the upper and lower parts of the door frame. The red pop-up window blocking the two people also disappeared, and the circular rotating lock in the center of the door suddenly returned to green. The door opened. The white smoke pouring out of the room suddenly flooded the two of them like a flood. The pungent smell that hit them in the face made Sato and Owzy cough a few times. Even though they were still wearing filter masks on their faces, they couldn't completely block out the strong smell of disinfectant. When Sato finally recovered, the corridor where the two stood was already covered with a layer of mist. Is this a generator? Completely different from what Sato imagined. There were no rows of generators standing side by side in the entire power control room. There was only a giant facility with a strange appearance lying quietly in the center of the room. Its upper part looked like a horn, but there were 5 yellow rings on its silver metal shell. In the center of the device, there was a hollow transformer wrapped by 12 brackets. Each bracket was tilted at a 30-degree angle with the other brackets to form a stable triangular structure. Below the transformer was a cylindrical device similar to a rocket jet. From the side, the cylinder was filled with turbines with blade fans. The whole device is about 10 meters high, and the height and width are both about 5 meters. There are 5 pipes with a diameter of 1 meter connected to the base of the device from different directions. It looks like something that is used to transport energy. Why is the power control room full of disinfectant spray? Satoru carefully raised his pistol and walked into the power control room. It was not until he and Owzy came to the control panel that they understood the reason. Under the base of the power generation device, it was covered with brown meat pieces like moss. However, these pieces of meat have obviously lost their vitality and have shrunk a lot. Otherwise the rough skin covering the surface of the meat would not be full of wrinkles, as disgusting as a worn-out rag. At this moment, these disgusting things are like rotten flesh on a dead body, stuck to the metal plate at the base of the power generation device. Damn it. Sato felt goosebumps all over his body because he found a small piece of meat stuck to the upper right corner of the operation panel. Where did this thing come from? Why did it grow under the power generation device? After witnessing this horrifying scene, Sato, who originally wanted to restart the power generation device, became cautious again. He decided to look for other clues from the control panel first. Since he and Owzy are now equivalent to the owners of the highest authority, Sato easily opened the encrypted system log recorded in the terminal. After omitting a series of repetitive and monotonous reports, Sato finally found some content that seemed to be quite informative. Power System Operation Record, Day 152, System Report. After system self-inspection, blockage was detected in pipelines 4 and 5, and the corresponding pipeline power transmission efficiency decreased by 3% and 5% respectively. Manual report. Because the experiment progress has reached a critical stage, in order to maintain a stable power supply, after consultation, the drone maintenance plan was cancelled. Encrypted information. I can understand that pipeline 5 is blocked, but why is pipeline 4 also blocked? No one would have secretly modified the transmission lines to use the spare threads of the main brain to mine. Power System Operation Record, Day 163, System Report. After system self-inspection, pipelines 3, 4, and 5 showed varying degrees of aging and blockage, and the corresponding pipeline power transmission efficiency decreased by 17%, 29%, and 46% respectively. Manual report. The manual repair plan is being prepared, and it is expected to be solved within 72 hours. Encrypted message. Last time I said that the sooner the repair is done, the sooner it will be finished, but you insisted on dragging it out. Now the efficiency has dropped to the point where it is not enough, and you want me to repair it again. A bunch of idiots. Log is damaged. Log is damaged. Power System Operation Record, Day 187, System Report. Everything is normal. Manual report. Everything is normal. Encrypted message. 72,697,680. 7769. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123. Everything is normal. This is the last system log that Satoru could find. As of now, according to the time displayed on the terminal, it is now the 2394th day since the project was put into operation. The power restart procedure is ready. Please wait patiently. After pulling the lever, click. At the moment when the system prompt appeared, the metal shell on the right side of the terminal also opened, and a red painted lever popped out. Satoru slowly grasped the lever with his hand, but he was not in a hurry to pull the lever. Looking at the lifeless and disgusting piece of meat on the base of the power generation device, Satoru always felt that he had missed something. At this moment, Owzy suddenly grabbed Satoru's arm holding the lever, signaling him not to do so. Do you think so too? Satoru took his hand away from the lever and took 2 steps back. Well, let's sort out the information and decide whether to restore the power. Although Satoru said this, if they don't restart the power, they will not get any information. This is tantamount to exploring in the dark, and the fate of the 2 people is likely to be the same as Naomiko and the others. However, even if they only have one option, which is to restart the power, they must first understand what the consequences of doing so will be. Otherwise, it is better to withdraw from here and take a long-term view. First of all, we can be sure that the disinfection spray here is definitely used to kill these disgusting pieces of meat, and the power control room was already blocked on the day of the disinfection. Sato, you made this judgment based on evidence, and the white mist that came out when the two opened the door alone was enough to explain the problem. Dalsy did not make any objection. Here comes the first contradiction. According to the last system log on the terminal, that is, the 187th day of the project entering operation, the power system has restored normal power supply, and the manual report did not find any problems. Unless these disgusting pieces of meat suddenly grew in a short period of time, it is impossible that the log of the last day is normal. Hearing this, Dalsy nodded vigorously to agree. But if we follow this assumption, then why are the scenes we see along the way so clean and tidy? Could it be that Gemini Medical has already prepared relevant plans so that they can retreat in an orderly manner when an accident occurs? When Sato you said this, both of them already had the answer in their hearts. No matter how well the drills are done, it is impossible for people to remain calm when danger really comes. And the more people there are, the easier it is to get into chaos. Once a small number of people panic, this negative emotion will immediately spread rapidly among the huge crowd and eventually completely break the fragile order and return the situation to chaos. Therefore, orderly retreat can only occur before the accident breaks out. Unless the people of Gemini Medical evacuate the area in advance, the crowd will definitely cause damage when they flee in panic. No, Gemini Medical cannot evacuate in advance. If they have foreseen the possible risks, the best thing to do is to nip the disaster in the bud. Even if this risk is unavoidable, in order not to leave any traces, they will definitely destroy this place completely, rather than leaving such a huge ruin for later people to explore and collect evidence. So the orderly evacuation of Gemini Medical and the normal operation of the power system are inherently contradictory, and the two cannot exist at the same time. What is the truth? After realizing this layer of logic hidden under the appearance, Sato Yu looked at the lever with more vigilance. But he couldn't figure out how these two contradictions happened in the real world. Just as Sato was lost in deep thought, Dalsy walked back to the control panel and opened the last system log. You mean the problem is here? Sato followed Dalsy's finger and looked at the column of encrypted information in the log. 72,697,680. 7769. This string of numbers should just be a system code or something like that. Why do you think there is a problem with it? Faced with Sato's doubts, Dalsy's face immediately showed an anxious expression, and she saw her fingers sliding frantically on the screen, pulling the system log back to the 152nd day of the project operation. Encrypted information. I can understand that pipeline number 5 is blocked, but why pipeline number 4 is also blocked, and no one will secretly change the transmission line to use the spare threads of the main brain to mine. After Sato read the information again, Dalsy pulled the log to the next. Encrypted information. Encrypted information. Last time I told you to fix it sooner and finish it sooner, but you kept dragging it out. Now your efficiency has dropped to the point where you are not enough, and you are asking me to fix it again. Seeing that Sato's Ayang still didn't react, Dalsy's expression had changed from anxious to angry. So she could only stare at Sato's Ayang angrily, first pointing at the encrypted information column, then pointing at herself, and then making a gesture of writing at the desk. Then, Dalsy scrolled to the bottom of the operation interface, pointed at the string of encrypted information, filled with numbers, patted the terminal shell hard, and then made a big X with both hands on her chest. You mean, the encrypted information column can't be a system code, it can only be filled in manually? It was not until then that Sato's Ayang understood what Dalsy meant. Dalsy nodded vigorously. Since encrypted information is filled in manually, why didn't the person who wrote this line of information express the content directly in text form like before? Sato, you asked Dalsy, following Dalsy's train of thought. Could this string of numbers have any special purpose? Is it a password to open something? Before Sato you could continue thinking, Dalsy took the lead and entered this mysterious string of numbers into his system. Unrecognizable command. Please check the content you entered. Dowsy was unwilling to close the text input box and directly opened the command device that needed to be entered in the programming language. Unrecognizable command. Click here to view error message. Dowsy clicked on the details page without hesitation. No valid command language detected. Matching language features. Character detection results. 12 numbers. 1 separator symbol. 10 candidate languages have been selected. Trying to translate the command. Option 1 translation failed. Option 2 translation failed. Option 3 translation successful. The incomplete content has been filtered. The final matching language. Decimal. Command translation result. Help me, help me. When these two cold words appeared in front of Satoru and Dowsy, they both felt an inexplicable chill. Is it possible? After a few seconds of silence, Satoru finally spoke. Is the everything is normal in the last log of the system a fake illusion? Chapter 124 The Silent Truth. The shock that encrypted message brought to Sato and Dowsy forced them to think about who had the problem, the system or the human. From all the inferences we made before, if the everything is normal in the system log is true, there are too many things that cannot be explained. Sato's pupils kept scanning the operation panel, but there is still a doubt. Why is it written everything is normal in the manual report? After repeatedly comparing several logs, Sato has roughly understood the meaning of each category. System report is a report issued by the intelligence system at a fixed time every day, following a specific format and sentence. Usually this report contains the problems found when the system performs self-inspection on that day. Manual report is something that is filled out by designated staff. It can be regarded as a supplement or follow-up to the content of system report. From its wording, it can be seen that this report is a formal content that will be recorded, so it looks very official. Encrypted message is also written by humans, and it is likely that the same person who made the manual report is also very colloquial, more like the employee's dissatisfaction and venting of the work content. To be on the safe side, Satoru also used the highest authority to query the document properties of encrypted information. As a result, he found that these so-called encrypted information were completely added by the employee privately and were not a necessary part of the work process at all. In short, the employee's behavior was basically to write a diary while working, and he also disguised his personal diary as a confidential document and hid it in a very inconspicuous place. I don't know if this can be regarded as an employee's personal hobby, but in the last system log, the content of manual report does not match the help request in encrypted information at all. I think there are two possibilities. First, the manual report at this time is no longer filled out by the previous employee. If it is a disguise made by Gemini Medical, then the newcomer will definitely follow the instructions and fill it out normally. Before Satoru had time to continue to explain his thoughts, Dowsy's head shook like a rattle. She first pointed at manual report and Satoru, then pointed at encrypted information and herself, and finally pointed at Satoru and made a gesture of writing at the desk while covering the last column of encrypted information. You mean, if the staffing is changed, the new person won't find out the existence of the encrypted information, let alone write it? Dowsy nodded vigorously. Well, what you said makes sense, so it seems that this possibility is not true. After thinking for a moment, Sato realized that Dowsy's idea was completely reasonable. Then it is more likely to be the situation I'm going to talk about next. The second situation is that the staffing has not changed, but this employee may know some secrets that cannot be told to others and is threatened by the upper management of Gemini Medical. Although his encrypted information is composed of a completely randomly generated 128-digit password, as long as he can be transferred to the highest authority, he can bypass the password and unconditionally access these contents, so he will use such an obscure way to express what he wants to say. After Satoru finished speaking his thoughts, Dowsy also fell into deep thought for a moment, and Satoru took the opportunity to look at the piece of meat under the power generation device again. No matter how you look at it, this doesn't look like everything is normal. After about a minute, Dowsy finally nodded to Satoru, indicating that he also agreed with his second guess. The two reached a consensus at this moment in the last log. The authenticity of the system report and manual report was questionable. Based on our current inferences, there was a high possibility that there were abnormalities in the power system until it was shut down. If we had restarted it rashly just now, it would definitely cause a disaster. At this time, the red pull rod looked more like a bright red poisonous apple in Satoru's eyes. Let me think about it. Is there any way to restore electricity without triggering danger? Satoru crossed his arms in front of his chest, staring at the control panel for 2 minutes. He subconsciously pulled out a dagger, wanting to cut off the annoying piece of meat that was stuck in the upper right corner of the terminal. Click. Just when the tip of the knife touched the raised part of the meat, Satoru and Ozzy suddenly heard a crisp sound like potato chips breaking, and the dry piece of meat instantly turned into powder and fell on the cold metal floor. Dowsy, you stay up there. I'll go down and clean up these disgusting things. After realizing that these inactive pieces of meat were so fragile, Satoru immediately took out a rope from his backpack and wrapped it around his waist and fixed the other end of the rope firmly under the guardrail, and then descended along the wall little by little to the base of the generator. As Satoru's feet stepped on the shriveled meat moss, the sound of shattering reached the ears of the two. Satoru just endured the discomfort all over his body and crushed all the pieces of meat on the base into powder by stomping on them. Finally, after Satoru climbed up the control console again by pulling the rope, the clean generator revealed its original appearance. It turns out that these things all came out of the pipes. The two pipes on the left-hand side of the tube can only be described as full of holes. The silver metal shell is covered with densely packed small holes, and at the connection between the end of the pipe and the generator, there is a hole large enough for Satoru to pass through easily. The two pipes on the right side of Sato and Ozzy were luckier. Although their surfaces also had varying degrees of wear and dents, Sato did not see any signs of damage on these pipes. Only the pipe closest to the tube could be seen to have obvious signs of repair. No 1, number 2, number 3. Sato read out the huge numbers, painted on the pipes from right to left. It seems that only number 3 has been successfully repaired among the pipes that have problems. Now they can finally be sure that the pieces of meat in the power control room came from pipes number 4 and number 5. Recalling the aging and blockage of pipes number 4 and number 5 seen in the system log before, Sato concluded that these pieces of meat were the cause of the pipeline failure. If we had pulled down the lever in advance, would the electricity have been transmitted to pipes number 4 and number 5? When thinking of this possibility, a layer of cold sweat oozed from Sato's forehead. But now that they have found the source of the problem, it is time to deal with it. Check whether the power system can operate independently. Satoru issued the first command to the system. System query. The power control system is equipped with separate computing hardware to support independent operation. Very good. Issue the command with the highest authority to cut off all connections between the power control system and the main brain. Chapter 125 Out of Control Mastermind. The command has been received, and the protocol required for the separation program is being retrieved. The protocol retrieval failed, and the reason for failure was that the master rejected the request. Warning: retrieving the protocol with the highest authority may cause some data to be damaged. Do you want to continue? Continue. The command has been received, and the authority has been adjusted to the highest. The retrieval program is being enforced. It has been detected that the master refuses to open the port, and the underlying link is being established. The master's request has been rejected. The master's request has been rejected. Due to the unstable link, some data files have been lost, and the estimated degree of damage is 31%. The protocol retrieval is successful, and the separation program has been started. The master's request has been rejected. The system has automatically removed the master from the whitelist, and risk monitoring is running. An intrusion from the master has been detected, and the master has been blacklisted. The risk prevention and control level has been raised to level 5, highest. Separation completed. Satoru finally breathed a sigh of relief after seeing the result. He didn't expect that he would encounter such a big accident just by doing a system separation. Satoru did this just for safety reasons. He couldn't check which of the default startup items of the power system had risks one by one. so he simply separated the power system separately to save him and Dowsy the time of screening them one by one. But now he found that the problem was far from as simple as he imagined. The main brain that should have stopped running long ago was still running, and it also tried to refuse to execute the separation order issued by Satoru. Thinking back to the 4 words everything is normal, Satoru couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat on his forehead. He suddenly began to suspect that there might be more than just people from Gemini Medical who had problems. It might also be a main brain that was having a seizure. Start the self-test program and check the status of all connection ports. After realizing the problem, Satoru didn't dare to slack off. The command has been received and 273 ports will be tested soon. The test is completed and 273 ports are in the shutdown state. The brief report is as follows. Main transmission ports. 5. Secondary transmission ports. 62. Adaptive flow ports. 206. These transmission ports were removed from the control of the main brain along with the separation of the power system. Query the corresponding pipelines in each area. Command received. Pipeline 1 corresponds to the power supply of area A. Pipeline 2 corresponds to the power supply of area B. Pipeline 3 corresponds to the power supply of area C. And pipeline 4 corresponds to the power supply of area D. Almost at the same time as the system began to report, the operation panel in front of Satoru also lit up the corresponding subdivided power supply port group, and it was accurate to each facility in each room. Why is there no information about pipeline 5? Satoru found that the system was stuck after talking about pipeline 4. Data damage. It's really unlucky that the damaged information is so critical. Satoru frowned. Turn off all default startup items except the power restart program and adjust all ports to manual switch mode. The system completed Satoru's command in less than a second. Everything is ready. Satoru slowly put his hand on the red lever. Even if Satoru had made all the preparations he could, he didn't dare to pat his chest and say that everything was foolproof. But moving forward itself is accompanied by risks, and Satoru can't stand still because of fear of risks. Are you ready, Dowsy? Sato could see that Dowsy was a little nervous. At this moment, she was blinking her sky blue eyes anxiously. However, after hearing Sato's question, Dowsy nodded firmly. Then let's get started. Sato closed his eyes and pulled the lever to the bottom. Buzz. A low roar sounded in the ears of the two people. The sound was like the engine of some large space vehicle being ignited and started, and it was getting louder and louder. The power generation device is starting. The giant facility in the center of the room suddenly began to vibrate. The 5 ring devices on the trumpet-shaped shell suddenly emitted dazzling golden light. Each ring was divided into 12 sections. Under the unknown force, it slowly broke away from the shell and floated on the periphery of the device to make regular circular motions. In the middle of the device, the hollow transformer had turned from black to blue. The dazzling current was tightly bound to the surface of the transformer, and it kept flowing towards the trumpet-shaped upper part like a slowly flowing water wave. In the lower part of the device, the rapidly rotating blade fan has left countless after images in Sato's vision, connecting the turbine in the center of the blade fan to form an illusory disc. The power generation device was successfully started. The stone in Sato's heart finally fell to the ground. He had witnessed the successful completion of this most critical and riskiest step. So he put his finger on the operation panel again and dragged out the power supply group he had pre-selected in advance. They corresponded to all the lighting facilities in the A3 area, door control, and power supply for smart terminals. In this way, even if the out-of-control main brain still has control over some facilities, it cannot use these facilities selected by Sato to interfere with their actions. Of course, Sato did this just in case. He knew that the main brain was relying on a weak independent power supply to maintain low power operation, and it was basically impossible to have spare power to issue orders to other subroutines. We need a little light. Sato pressed the confirmation button. The bright light instantly illuminated the entire power control room, and the corridor behind the two of them was instantly as bright as day. The two people, who had already adapted to the dim light, even squinted their eyes under the strong light to reduce the pain from their eyes. When the two walked out of the power control room again, the emergency lights emitting dark red light had all dimmed. After 6 years of uninterrupted operation, they finally got a rest. Looking at the rows of doors with green lights in the corridor, Satoru and Aozi both smiled. However, the smiles on their faces disappeared without a trace after entering the first room. This is a standard 10 square meter dormitory without an independent bathroom. The furnishings in the room are only a desk, a revolving chair with a backrest, a wardrobe embedded in the wall, a folding upright storage box, and a single bed. A quiet-looking lady was lying quietly in the chair, and her skin and clothes were already covered with thick dust. Although the lady had no wounds on her body, judging from her dull and terrified eyes and pale skin color, there was no doubt that she had been dead for many years. The air in the room was a little damp and stuffy, but neither Satoshi nor Aozi smelled any foul odor. It was as if death was just a silent freeze frame of reality. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.